Chapter 860 The Destroyed Wang Family. The Wang family emperors fall one after another. The great battle continues unabated. As time goes by little, the entire Wang family was also completely slaughtered by the great Snow Dragon Riders, led by Chen Jibao. At this time, the Snow Dragon Riders and the Blazing Fire Legion were constantly gathering resources from within the royal family. The entire Wang family has now completely vanished into the annals of history. Everyone who witnessed this scene had a touch of emotion in their eyes. Especially the Su and Qin families at this time. They never expected that the Wang family would end up like this. When they looked at Chu Wuxuang, their eyes were filled with lingering fear. Fortunately, the Su and Qin families did not choose to attack Chu Wuxuang. Otherwise, they would probably have been met with this terrifying army. They knew perfectly well that they could not withstand this army, and if this army attacked them, then their two families would be doomed to perish in the annals of history. Thinking of this, they felt a touch of schadenfreude towards Chu Wuxuang, whom the Wang family had provoked. If the Wang family hadn't provoked Chu Wuxuang, how could they have possibly been destroyed? It should be noted that the Wang family is one of the most powerful families in the entire ancient imperial city, a family that even the Su and Qin families dare not offend. Unfortunately, the Wang family will cease to exist after today. As for the city lord of the ancient imperial city, although his eyes held a gloomy expression, he could only calmly watch this scene. More importantly, the city lord of the ancient emperor city was also extremely angry with the Wang family. Although the ancient emperor city belonged to him, the Wang family acted as if they were real princes ruling over the city. Meanwhile, the matriarch of the Wang family, who was engaged in a fierce battle, looked at Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue in front of her with great anger in her eyes. Clearly, she hadn't expected the Wang family to be so easily wiped out in everyone's sight. Then, the matriarch of the Wang family glared angrily at Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue in front of her, and a terrifying aura instantly emanated from her body. Without the slightest hesitation, they charged directly towards Ji Haoyue and Jiang Taishu. At this point, she already knew that she was doomed to die no matter what. Therefore, the old matriarch of the Wang family now intends to perish together with Ji Haoyue and Jiang Taishu. Perhaps this is the only thing she can do for the Wang family. Then, the terrifying aura emanating from the old matriarch of the Wang family pressed down directly towards Ji Haoyue and Jiang Taishu. But how could Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue be such simple beings? Both of them are now on the verge of becoming a great emperor. Therefore, two extremely terrifying auras instantly emanated from the two of them. A dazzling light instantly emanated from their bodies. The next second, the two of them clashed directly with old Madame Wang. A terrifying power instantly emanated from the entire sky. Then the entire void seemed to be completely shattered by these two terrifying forces. The next second, the entire void shattered. At the same time, the old matriarch of the Wang family was completely overwhelmed by these two terrifying attacks. It was as if the person had never existed. Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue were blasted away by this terrifying force. They only saw it clearly after the great battle was clearly displayed before them. Both Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue looked somewhat disheveled. However, it is clear that Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue were not seriously injured. The old matriarch of the Wang family had her entire body dented from the blows. Meanwhile, her mutilated body continued to sway in the wind. The better news is that the matriarch of the Wang family did not pass away. Instead, he looked at Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue with resentment. Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue exchanged a glance without hesitation upon seeing this scene. The two then charged at the old matriarch of the Wang family once again. The terrifying aura emanating from the two of them was immediately released. At this moment, the two of them were like two killing gods. When the matriarch of the Wang family saw this, she waved to the people below. Then, a bright green light appeared around old Madame Wang. The emerald green light quickly enveloped her entire body. Then her shattered body began to slowly and continuously repair itself. In the blink of an eye, the body of the old lady of the Wang family was completely restored. He looked as if he had never been injured. Clearly, the matriarch of the Wang family also used this terrifying power to completely repair her body. Then she looked at Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue in front of her again. A fierce glint flashed in his eyes once again. Then he charged towards Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue once again. A terrifying battle once again unfolded across the entire void. While the matriarch of the Wang family was still engaged in a fierce battle with Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lu Bu also needed to quickly deal with the emperor-level figure from the Wang family in front of him. After all, they're now working together to take down an emperor. Therefore, their speed is now far beyond that of Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue. Then, the two of them focused all their efforts on attacking the Emperor of the Wang family. The next second, the Emperor of the Wang family was completely overwhelmed by their attack. Subsequently, this Emperor of the Wang family, unsurprisingly, perished in the combined attack of Lu Bu and his companion. With the fall of this great Emperor of the royal family, the other powerful figures of the Wang family, who were at the great Emperor level, also began to falter. Then they began to slowly fall at the hands of powerful emperors of the Great Xia Empire. In the end, the entire battlefield was reduced to a great battle between Wang Changsheng of the Wang family and the Void Emperor. Meanwhile, the other battle was between the matriarch of the Wang family, Jiang Taishu, and Ji Haoyue, and the great battle between Zhao Wuji, the last holy son of the Heavenly God Academy, and Baihu, a follower of Chu Wushuang of the Great Xia Empire. As for the other major battles, they have been completely resolved. It can be said that the Wang family suffered heavy losses in this great battle. For Emperor-level beings have already fallen. And more importantly, this is not the end, because the matriarch of the Wang family and Wang Changsheng were destined to perish at the hands of the Great Xia Empire, no matter what. Therefore, they are currently fighting with all their might against the top experts of the Great Xia Empire. But ultimately, their fate remained unchanged. As time goes by, the matriarch of the Wang family finally could no longer hold on, although she was constantly recovering her body using her powerful methods. Even so, it could not withstand the repeated falls. In the end, the old matriarch of the Wang family could only glance at Chu Wushuang with resentment. Then he completely disappeared into the annals of history. Chapter 861, Wang Changsheng's Forced Nirvana and the Tragic Fate of Zhao Wuji. Clearly, she never imagined that one day she would perish at the hands of a powerful outsider. Even so, there was no regret in the eyes of the old lady of the Wang family. In fact, if she could, she would deal with Chu Wushuang as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, she didn't have that opportunity. After the passing of the Wang family's matriarch, Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue calmly withdrew their auras. However, it can be seen that Jiang Taishu, who was dressed in white, had his white clothes stained red with blood. His body was covered in numerous scars. Clearly, the battle he just fought was not particularly easy for him. As for Ji Haoyue beside him, one of her arms was broken. At the same time, the weapon in his hand was completely shattered. Although Ji Haoyue's strength had also reached the Great Emperor Perfection realm. However, there is still a certain gap between him and Jiang Taishu. Therefore, his injuries were more severe in this major battle. The two quickly arrived at Chu Wushuang's side. Then, without the slightest hesitation, Ji Haoyue nodded to Chu Wushuang and sat down on the ground to begin healing her injuries. After all, his injuries are still too serious. Upon seeing this, Chu Wushuang nodded to Jiang Taishu and the others beside her. Jiang Taishu and Ji Run then quickly sat down to recover from their injuries. Of course, Lu Bu and the others did not have any injuries, because the most difficult battle was between Jiang Taishu and Ji Haoyue. The two of them were facing the matriarch of the royal family, who was the wife of the first emperor. At the same time that all members of the Wang family perished in this great battle. At this moment, Wang Changsheng, who was fighting against the Void Emperor, also had a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Clearly, he never imagined that one day his Wang family would be completely wiped out. Then, he looked at the Void Emperor in front of him with a determined look, and his eyes showed an unprecedented solemnity. Since you intend to destroy my Wang family, I will not let you off so easily. As Wang Changsheng finished speaking, the aura of annihilation emanating from his body began to slowly erupt. Now, it feels as if he is about to be completely lost in the underworld. Then, this terrifying aura of annihilation enveloped his entire body. Even the Void Emperor was unable to tear apart the terrifying aura of annihilation surrounding Wang Changsheng. You do have a grand ambition, but even if you are reborn, so what? You have only forcibly entered the level of the Third Emperor, and there is still a certain gap between you and me. The Void Emperor looked at Wang Changsheng in front of him and instantly understood his meaning. Then, he slowly looked at Wang Changsheng and spoke. After speaking, the Void Emperor slowly stood in front of Wang Changsheng, waiting for Wang Changsheng's rebirth. It turns out that Wang Changsheng now knows he is no match for the Void Emperor, so he did not hesitate at all and chose to annihilate. Of course, his annihilation was not a direct fall, but rather a choice to undergo a rebirth, forcibly breaking through to the level of a three-generation emperor. In other words, if he wanted to truly break through to the level of the Third Emperor, it would take at least tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. But now he can break through to the level of a Third Emperor in the blink of an eye. However, this would also make him a fleeting figure, like a flash in the pan. In other words, Wang Changsheng has now chosen to forcibly enter this realm and fight against the Void Emperor. No matter what the final outcome may be, he will ultimately perish at the hands of the Void Emperor. Of course, Wang Changsheng still hoped to replace the Void Emperor. Otherwise, why would he have chosen to be reborn from the ashes? Just as Wang Changsheng was undergoing a continuous rebirth. At this moment, the great battle between Baihu and Zhao Wuji also came to a conclusion. The white tiger truly deserves its place as one of the 4 divine beasts. At this moment, his silver-white armor was stained with a lot of blood. The halberd in his hand was completely broken in two during the battle. Clearly, even his halberd couldn't withstand the terror of this battle. There was a huge dent in his chest. The huge dent in the wall is a testament to just how difficult the battle that just took place was. Even so, one could still see a determined look in his eyes as he gazed at Zhao Wuji of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, Zhao Wuji of the Heavenly God Academy was panting heavily. His eyes were also filled with anger as he looked at the white tiger opposite him. You can see that there are many fragments of the Great Seal standing in front of him. It turned out that his Great Seal was completely shattered in this great battle. His body was covered in numerous wounds. One of his arms was also severed by Baihu's halberd. Her hair was also loose and falling over her shoulders. His entire body was covered in crimson blood. This made the Holy Son of the Heavenly God Academy look extremely disheveled. Even he himself never imagined that one day he would be defeated by the white tiger. More importantly, the broken halberd of Baihu was still stuck in his chest. Fresh blood was continuously flowing from the broken part of the halberd. One after another, waves of destructive energy were constantly swirling around the halberd. This caused the Holy Son of the Heavenly God Academy to have a look of anger and resentment in his eyes. You have lost. You couldn't even defeat me, let alone fight my prince. At this moment, Baihu slowly took a step forward, looking at Zhao Wuji of the Heavenly God Academy with a determined look in his eyes, and spoke. Although Baihu initially looked down on Zhao Wuji. However, Baihu was now looking at Zhao Wuji in front of him with some seriousness. It could be said that he now acknowledges Zhao Wuji in front of him. After all, although Zhao Wuji was defeated by him, he could sense that Zhao Wuji was not weak. As Zhao Wuji watched the white tiger slowly approaching him, he gritted his teeth and straightened his body before leisurely turning his gaze to the white tiger. Your strength is not bad. I did lose this battle, but I still want to know how strong Chu Wushuang is. Then, Zhao Wuji looked at Chu Wushuang with a determined look in his eyes. At this moment, he was no longer the arrogant and unruly Holy Son of the Heavenly God Academy. On the contrary, he was a true prodigy. Your Highness Wushuang's strength is beyond your comprehension. If you want to know His Highness Wushuang's strength, then defeat me first. But believe me, if you knew His Highness Wushuang's true strength, you would feel despair. Baihu was somewhat surprised to hear Zhao Wuji's words, but he quickly replied with a hint of respect, because Baihu knew just how terrifying his lord's strength had become. However, he still looked firmly at Zhao Wuji in front of him. Chapter 862 Confident Chu Wushuang, Zhao Wuji leaves. Zhao Wuji nodded in agreement after hearing Baihu's words. However, at this moment, he still firmly fixed his gaze on Chu Wushuang's direction, and the intense fighting spirit in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest. It was as if he still wanted to challenge Chu Wushuang. Upon witnessing this scene, Baihu's face showed a hint of surprise. He originally thought that Zhao Wuji might back down if he knew his prince's strength, but he didn't expect that this guy would still have such terrifying fighting spirit after knowing his prince's strength. A prodigy of this caliber will undoubtedly be incredibly powerful as they grow up. Thinking of this, he frowned as he looked at Zhao Wuji in front of him. However, at this moment, Chu Wushuang in the sky slowly spoke. Your talent is not weak, but it is not enough in front of me. Chu Wushuang's voice was very loud, and at the same time, he looked at Zhao Wuji in front of him with a calm expression. Although Zhao Wuji's temperament is quite terrifying, they may grow in strength and threaten the great Xia Empire in the future. However, Chu Wushuang had complete confidence in herself. Therefore, he was naturally not afraid of a mere holy son from the Heavenly God Academy. I know I'm no match for you now, but when I reach your level, I'll come back to challenge you. At this moment, Zhao Wuji looked at Chu Wushuang with a serious expression and spoke. After he finished speaking, a look of determination once again appeared in his eyes. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the two top experts from the Heavenly God Academy. Then he slowly nodded to the two top experts from the Heavenly God Academy. The two top experts from the Heavenly God Academy looked at Emperor Hengyu beside Chu Wushuang with great solemnity. Then they quickly arrived at Zhao Wuji's side. He still looked at Chu Wushuang with a hint of wariness in his eyes. Let's go. He won't kill me. Or rather, he wouldn't bother killing me now. Upon seeing this scene, Zhao Wuji shook his head and said, after he finished speaking, he looked earnestly in Chu Wushuang's direction. Without the slightest hesitation, he headed directly towards the ancient human path. Regarding the great battle between Wang Changsheng of the Wang family and the Void Emperor of the Great Xia Empire, he chose not to continue watching, because he knew that the Great Xia Empire would ultimately win this great battle. Therefore, there's no point in him staying here to watch the game. The two top experts from the Heavenly God Academy beside him also quickly followed Zhao Wuji and left the place, just as Zhao Wuji and his two companions left the ancient imperial city. At this moment, the White Tiger also came to Chu Wuchuang's side. He still looked at his prince with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Do you think it's wrong of me not to kill him? At this moment, Chu Wuchuang slowly looked at the White Tiger in front of him and spoke, his eyes still showing a calm expression. It was as if Zhao Wuji really meant nothing to him. Everything your highness did had your highness's purpose, but I really don't know why your highness let Zhao Wuji go. Upon hearing Chu Wuchuang's words, Baihu's face instantly broke into a smile. Then, he looked at his prince with a serious expression and spoke. Xuanwu and Qing Long, who were standing next to Baihu, also looked at Chu Wuchuang with puzzled expressions. After all, they now believe that even if Baihu can't defeat Zhao Wuji, they can still completely kill him from the Heavenly God Academy by joining forces. Moreover, judging from Zhao Wuji's talent, he may become a powerful enemy of the Great Xia Empire in the future. Therefore, they couldn't understand why their prince didn't kill him. His talent is indeed remarkable, but I can kill him anytime I want. No matter how fast he grows, he can't catch up with me. Besides, I think he will eventually fall at your hands. Chu Wuchuang smiled after hearing Baihu's words, and then looked at Baihu and the others with great determination. Although Zhao Wuji's talent is indeed quite good, however, the gap between him and Chu Wuchuang is too great. Even if Chu Wuchuang gave him time to catch up, he still couldn't catch up to Chu Wuchuang's true back view. More importantly, Chu Wuchuang's followers, namely the three divine beasts, also possess incredibly formidable talents. They might be able to eliminate Zhao Wuji when they grow up. Moreover, the top geniuses of their Great Xia Empire are not just a few of them. Putting aside other things, take Xian Yuanpa for example. He also had the opportunity to deal with Zhao Wuji. Therefore, letting go of a minor prodigy is not a big problem for him. Your Highness, rest assured, we will continue to suppress him. After hearing Chu Wuchuang's words, Baihu replied with a serious expression, then slowly turned his gaze to the distance. If even his highness is so at ease, then what reason does he have not to let Zhao Wuji go? The others understood what was going on after hearing the conversation between Baihu and Chu Wuchuang. So when they looked at Chu Wuchuang again, their eyes were filled with admiration. Just as Zhao Wuji left. At this moment, everyone slowly turned their gazes away. Then he turned his gaze toward the direction from which the terrifying fluctuation in the depths of the void was coming from. At this time, Wang Changsheng was still undergoing a continuous process of rebirth. The Void Emperor sat cross-legged below the Void Mirror. He looked at Wang Changsheng, who was undergoing rebirth, with a calm expression in his eyes. If he wants to deal with Wang Changsheng now, he can use some of his trump cards. However, the Void Emperor chose to wait for Wang Changsheng to truly achieve nirvana. Then, when Wang Changsheng was at his most arrogant, we dealt with him directly. Moreover, Wang Changsheng himself knew the reason why his lifespan was not long. Therefore, he is now unleashing all his strength. This is also why the Void Emperor did not completely eliminate him in a short time, as Wang Changsheng's aura began to slowly become extremely terrifying. A terrifying fluctuation seemed to appear in the entire void, constantly radiating outwards. At this moment, the Void Emperor slowly opened his eyes. Then it stood calmly in the sky. His void mirror slowly descended from the sky. Then it fell directly into the hands of the Void Emperor. However, it is clear that the void mirror is still trembling. Clearly, the real battle is about to begin. All the powerful figures and prodigies who witnessed this scene looked at the direction of the Void Emperor with a sense of shock. However, many people have already guessed the final outcome of this great battle. Wang Changsheng's strength is not weak. But how could he possibly be a match for the Void Emperor after being forced into nirvana? Chapter 863 Wang Changsheng's successful rebirth and the mysterious token. Under the watchful eyes of everyone. At this moment, from within the annihilating law enveloping Wang Changsheng, one muffled sound after another was heard. These dull sounds were clearly the beating of a heart, but his voice went far beyond the sound of ordinary drumming. Instantly, everyone's eyes were drawn to the direction where Wang Changsheng had undergone nirvana. As time goes by little. At this moment, Wang Changsheng, who had undergone nirvana, slowly began to appear before everyone. The aura of annihilation emanating from him began to slowly dissipate. The terrifying aura emanating from his body began to slowly emanate. At this moment, he had completely broken through to the level of the Third Emperor. However, it was because he chose to force himself into nirvana. So although he has broken through to this level, he now has a full head of white hair. His face was completely bloodless. Even his skin started to dry out. It was as if someone had drained his energy and spirit. It looks very strange. However, it can be seen that Wang Changsheng still had an excited smile on his face at this moment. I succeeded. I never thought I would actually succeed. Wang Changsheng's eyes were filled with excitement and fervor. He hadn't expected to succeed so easily. However, he quickly turned his gaze to the Void Emperor in front of him, his eyes revealing a hint of killing intent. He then said firmly, "Even if I can't kill you, I will severely injure you." After saying that, he charged straight toward the Void Emperor without the slightest hesitation. The aura of annihilation emanating from him instantly made him even more terrifying. At the same time, he was also standing on a desolate path. The aura of annihilation emanating from him caused the entire void to tremble instantly. However, the Void Emperor was already a being who had broken through to the level of a three-life emperor long ago. Moreover, the Void Emperor's strength was already among the top tier. The Void Emperor slowly clenched his fist in front of him. Then, the terrifying Void Laws rushed directly towards Wang Changsheng. But the Void Emperor had no intention of stopping after doing all this. He then struck out with his palm towards Wang Changsheng in front of him. The next second, a giant hand appeared in the sky. This enormous palm carried a terrifying pressure as it rushed directly towards Wang Changsheng. This is the Void Great Handprint created by the Void Emperor. The terrifying laws of the Void instantly filled the surrounding space-time. It was as if the entire space-time was completely locked down. Upon seeing this, Wang Changsheng quickly threw a punch into the sky. Then the laws behind him began to crumble. A fist carrying the aura of the Law of Annihilation shot directly toward the giant handprint in the sky. The next second, the Law of Annihilation and the Law of Void collided directly. At the moment these two laws collided, the entire void erupted in chaos. However, at this moment, the two transformed into two beams of light and were constantly engaged in battle. A terrifying pressure emanated directly from the two of them. Everyone was staring intently at the great battle, because this great battle has far exceeded their expectations. Watching such a major battle can naturally help them improve rapidly. Even the city lord of the ancient imperial city watched the great battle without pausing for a moment. However, Chu Wuxuang below paid little attention to the battle above. Instead, he slowly gazed down at the Wang family's territory. However, the Wang family has now been completely wiped out, so what lies below is nothing but ruins. However, Chu Wuxuang quickly probed his divine sense into the storage ring of the old matriarch of the Wang family. The storage ring contained many spirit stones. Of course, there are many other treasures besides these. None of these things had any effect on Chu Wuxuang. He immediately turned his gaze to the Wang family's inherited cultivation techniques. The Heavenly Dragon Emperor Scripture. The first book is the imperial scripture of the Wang family, which is also the main cultivation method practiced by the Wang family. However, Chu Wuxuang only glanced at him before abandoning him, although this technique is probably very precious to others. But to him, it was like a piece of waste paper. He then glanced at the other martial arts manuals in the hands of the old matriarch of the Wang family. But he looked down on all of these things. So Chu Wuxuang simply threw them into his spatial ring. Then he slowly looked toward the direction of the last token. This is a token as black as ink. However, one can see that this pitch-black token is imbued with a terrifying aura. It could even be said that even Chu Wuxuang, who had already reached the quasi-emperor level, felt a sense of unease. But more importantly, Chu Wuxuang felt a very familiar feeling about this token. It was as if it were something I knew best. What is it that I feel so familiar with? Chu Wuxuang looked at the jet-black token with great confusion. At the same time, he was also wondering what the true purpose of this token was. After all, he didn't have much of a relationship with the Wang family. But now he felt that there was something familiar about this row of tokens. This moment made him feel incredible. Could it be something left behind by Father? I heard that Father entered the ancient Void Road before us. Then Chu Wuxuang frowned and muttered to herself. Chu Wuxuang naturally knew that Chu Fan had already entered the ancient Starry Sky Road. However, he still has no news of his father. Therefore, after sensing the most familiar aura within this token, he guessed that it belonged to Chu Fan. After all, if this thing has nothing to do with him, that's probably largely related to her father. However, Chu Wuxuang quickly shook his head again, even though the aura within the token felt very familiar to him. However, the aura emanating from this token was quite different from that of his own father. Therefore, Chu Wuxuang now denies that the token contains any secret information about Chu Fan. Then Chu Wuxuang directly inputted all his human emperor laws, time laws, and so on into this token. And the moment his human emperor Law came into contact with this token, the token, which was originally pitch black, began to emit beams of golden light. These golden rays instantly adhered to Chu Wushuang's human emperor Law. It was as if they had finally found the real protagonist. At the same time, these golden lights also began to become active. Chapter 864, The Golden Token, Chu Fan in the Ancient Battlefield of the Human Race. More importantly, these golden rays seemed to represent the true fortune of humankind. They began to unleash bursts of aura. At the same time, Chu Wushuang instantly sensed the source of this familiar aura. I never expected that this token would contain the aura of the human emperor's law. In this world, who else besides my father, Yanran, and me could possess the human king's law? At this moment, Chu Wushuang looked at the token in his hand with a look of astonishment on his face, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, he also began to speculate. In this universe, only the great Xia Empire possesses the human emperor's law. Apart from that, Chu Wushuang had never heard of anyone else who possessed the human emperor's law. No, I heard that the Xianyuan family once had a Xianyuan human emperor. That Xianyuan human emperor was also a powerful expert at the human emperor level. Could it be that the laws of the human emperor level here were left behind by him? At this moment, Chu Wushuang murmured again, as he could sense that the aura of the human emperor's law on this token did not belong to Chu Fan, nor to Chu Yanran. Of course, besides them, the Sun Emperor and the Moon Emperor in their Great Xia Empire also cultivate the Emperor's law, but the Moon Emperor and the Sun Emperor are currently within the Great Xia Empire. It's impossible for them to be here now. Therefore, Chu Wushuang quickly guessed the identity of the Emperor of the Xianyuan family. After all, the human Emperor was a figure from millions of years ago. If it really is him, then the human Emperor's law within this token also has an explanation. However, at this moment, Chu Wushuang was not entirely certain. Then he continued to channel the aura of the human Emperor's law from his hand into the token. Soon, the token changed from pitch black to golden. More importantly, a large, heaven character is engraved in the very center of the token. Although Chu Wushuang didn't know what this word represented, but this also gave him a clue to continue his search. Soon, Chu Wushuang began searching for other things in the storage ring of the old matriarch of the Wang family. Since we know that this token represents the human emperor's law, so the matriarch of the Wang family must know something. More importantly, Chu Wushuang now has a vague suspicion in her mind. From the very beginning, he had been wondering why the Wang family would keep targeting him. If it were merely his killing of the Wang family's holy son and severely injuring the Wang family's Taoist Wang Dao, it wouldn't have caused the entire Wang family to refrain from taking action to capture him. However, looking at the token in his hand that possessed the laws of the human emperor, Chu Wushuang began to have some guesses. It must be that the Wang family knows that I possess the human emperor's law, so they want to use my human emperor's law to open this token, or rather, to unlock what's behind this token. It can be said that Chu Wushuang's guess is now almost the truth. However, no matter how hard Chu Wushuang searched, he could not find any information about this token. However, what Chu Wushuang didn't know was that his token was still faintly flashing a yellow light. This yellow light was quite different from, yet also very similar to the Golden Emperor's law emanating from him. And at the same time, this golden token was constantly flashing its light. At this moment, on the human battlefield at the end of the ancient human road, Chu Fan was leading the Emperor through the battlefield of the human race. Although this is a battlefield for the human race. However, it can be said that there were no people seen within a radius of thousands of miles, or even throughout the entire battlefield. Chu Fan was now holding a golden token in his hand. If Chu Wushuang were here, he would find that this golden token is exactly the same as the golden token in his hand. The first human emperor, we just don't know what the secret to becoming an immortal he left behind is. At this moment, Chu Fan spoke while playing with the token in his hand, and a hint of curiosity could be seen in his eyes. It turns out that after leaving the ancient emperor's city, Chu Fan came to the Jinxian city of the human race. However, as soon as he arrived in Jinxian city, he felt a very attractive aura. This is why Chu Fan didn't go to Jinxian city, but went directly to the ancient battlefield of the human race. Chu Fan, who had arrived at the ancient battlefield of the human race, also entered a secret realm belonging to only the three great emperors. Therefore, he was naturally suppressed by Chu Fan. He then obtained this golden token in the secret realm. He also learned the secret of this golden token. It turns out that the golden token in his hand and the golden token that Chu Wushuang has now obtained are both tokens left behind by the first human emperor. The main reason why the first human emperor left behind the token was so that someone could open the legacy he left behind when they cultivated the human emperor's law in the future. Of course, this first human emperor left behind more than just one token. Otherwise, how could Chu Fan and Chu Wushuang each possess one? According to the information Chu Fan obtained, there should be 4 tokens left behind by the first human emperor. However, unlike the legacies left by others, his legacies do not require the collection of 4 tokens to open the human emperor's legacy. On the contrary, only 1 token is needed to unlock the human emperor's legacy. Then, by relying on one's own laws of the human emperor to gain the human emperor's approval, one can obtain the inheritance of that first human emperor. As for the true name of the first human emperor, Chu Fan did not know. Having obtained the token, he continued to search for the legacy left behind by the first human emperor in the ancient battlefield. After all, it was from that secret realm that he learned about the first human emperor who directly led his celestial dynasty to ascension. Such a momentous event once shocked the entire world. Therefore, Chu Fan also wanted to see the secret of the first human emperor's ascension. This is why he directly led the emperor to continuously search for the legacy left behind by that human emperor in the ancient battlefields of the human race. Your Majesty, have you sensed the aura of the legacy left behind by that human emperor? At this moment, Chu Fan looked at the emperor beside him with some helplessness and said that they had been searching in the ancient battlefield of the human race for almost half a year. But even so, they had not found the inheritance left by the first human emperor. This moment made Chu Fan feel somewhat helpless. At the same time, he had cursed the first emperor countless times in his heart. If the goal is to leave behind a legacy, then why should I remain on the ancient battlefield of the human race? It would be better to stay in the human race's Zhenshin city. In this way, anyone who possesses the token and the human emperor's law can go directly to the inheritance site. Of course, although Chu Fan felt that this first human emperor was somewhat unethical, he still did not choose to give up on this journey to find the inheritance. Chapter 865: An encounter with the human emperor on the ancient battlefield and the existence of the otherworldly demons. Because Chu Fan is not far from becoming an immortal, so he also wanted to see how this first human emperor led his era to the immortal realm. Of course, it's possible that this is just a legend about the first human emperor, but Chu Fan still intends to go and see the legacy left behind by this first human emperor. After all, only by obtaining the legacy left by the first human emperor could he know whether the legends were true or not. Meanwhile, the emperor, who was standing beside Chu Fan, frowned after hearing his words. Because at this time, the emperor discovered that even if he spread all his divine sense throughout the ancient battlefield of the human race, he could not find the legendary inheritance of the human emperor. Your Majesty, I cannot sense the legacy of the human emperor in this ancient battlefield. Apart from the danger, there seems to be no other aura in this ancient battlefield of the human race. Then he slowly spoke to Chu Fan, a hint of doubt in his eyes. Clearly, even the emperor hadn't expected this to happen. When they first obtained the human emperor's decree, the emperor also thought that the human emperor's decree could unlock the human emperor's legacy, but he did not expect that even now they have not found the legendary place to unlock the human emperor's legacy. It should be noted that the two of them had been walking in the ancient battlefield of the human race for almost half a year, and they had explored almost the entire ancient battlefield. Even so, they still couldn't find the legendary site where the human emperor's lineage was passed down. Chu Fan felt somewhat helpless after hearing the emperor's words. Then he continued to push the emperor's law in his hand. He wanted to see if he could attract the human emperor's inheritance site by using the human emperor's law. After all, he was one of the few who cultivated the laws of the human emperor. Moreover, according to Chu Fan's understanding, apart from the former Emperor Xinyuan, only their great Xia Empire possesses the ability to cultivate the human emperor's law. While Chu Fan was constantly using the laws of the human emperor to search for the place of the human emperor's inheritance. At this moment, the emperor frowned, and then slowly looked into the distance. At this moment, the emperor's gaze seemed to pierce through time and space, looking at the person on the other side of time and space. Then, the emperor slowly looked at Chu Fan in front of him and spoke with a serious expression. Your Majesty, there are human emperors on this ancient human road, one of whom has even reached the level of a 6th-generation emperor. They're currently engaged in a great battle with the alien demons in the ancient battlefield. As soon as the emperor finished speaking, he immediately turned his gaze to the distance. Upon hearing the emperor's words, Chu Fan's face showed a hint of curiosity. Since arriving at the ancient battlefield of the human race, this was the first time he had heard of a human emperor in the ancient battlefield of the human race. Of course, they also saw the legendary alien demons in the ancient battlefield of the human race. Because this ancient battlefield was originally used to seal the legendary alien demons, Chu Fan and his companion naturally saw the legendary alien demons in this ancient battlefield. However, due to their immense strength, these so-called demons were all killed by the two of them. Let's go and see what the human emperor is doing in the ancient battlefield of the human race this time. Then Chu Fan spoke directly to the emperor beside him, and after speaking, he slowly looked into the distance. At the same time, he could also vaguely sense the aura of the great battle over there. He didn't notice this at first. However, after the emperor's reminder, he naturally sensed these emanating auras as well. The two then headed directly towards the direction where the human emperor and the otherworldly demons were fighting. Soon, Chu Fan and the emperor arrived at a huge battlefield. Meanwhile, in this vast battlefield, a human emperor was engaged in a fierce battle with a demon. This demon's strength reached an extremely terrifying level. Even if the human emperor in front of him, who had reached the 6th generation of emperors, didn't have time to completely eliminate him. Meanwhile, the other human emperors were engaged in battle with other alien demons. Fortunately, these demons were not particularly powerful, so they were able to hold on at this point. Of course, these emperors who were in the midst of a great battle also sensed the arrival of Chu Fan and his companion. They immediately turned their gazes towards them. He looked at Chu Fan and the emperor with a hint of wariness in his eyes. After all, if Chu Fan and the emperor were to attack them at this moment. So now, the ultimate fate of these human emperors is to perish here. However, after discovering that Chu Fan and the emperor were both great emperors of the human race, a look of ecstatic joy finally appeared on their faces. Because as long as Chu Fan and the emperor are both human, then Chu Fan and the earthly venerable can help them deal with the alien demons in front of them. We would like to ask our two friends to help us deal with these demonic creatures. At this moment, the 6th emperor did not hesitate at all and spoke directly to Chu Fan and the other two. As his voice fell, he continued to fight against the terrifying alien demon opposite him. Chu Fan frowned after hearing what the 6th emperor said. Without hesitation, he immediately joined the battle. Chu Fan's strength had already reached the level of a 3-generation human emperor. He is now very close to becoming the 4th emperor. Therefore, Chu Fan's strength can be considered top tier. So he went straight for the demon in front of one of the 3 emperors. Then, the terrifying aura of the human emperor's law erupted from his body. The terrifying force slammed directly into the alien demon in front of them. In an instant, the demon in front of him was sent flying backward. After doing all this, Chu Fan immediately took out his human emperor's sword. The terrifying sword energy instantly swept across the entire sky. At the same time, he directly charged towards both sides of the alien demons, wielding the human emperor's sword. Of course, the emperor did not choose to take action at this time. Since arriving at the ancient battlefield of the human race, Chu Fan has been honing his strength. After all, his improvement rate was too fast. If you don't improve your skills through actual combat, his strength, however, cannot be improved rapidly. After all, he wanted to become invincible among those of the same realm. Therefore, Chu Fan will not intervene unless he foresees a situation that the demon emperor cannot resolve. What Chu Fan didn't know was the moment the human emperor's law emanated from his body. A burning light instantly appeared in the eyes of the 6th emperor of the human race. At this moment, the 6th emperor of the human race looked directly at Chu Fan with no attempt to hide the excitement in his eyes. The emperor outside naturally witnessed this scene. He frowned, intending to attack the human emperor. However, he soon stopped walking. He also wanted to see what the human emperor was thinking. Chapter 866, An Unexpected Surprise, Wang Tianlong's Plan. Therefore, the emperor did not choose to take action, since he wanted to see what the emperor was thinking. If he chose to take action now, the emperor would certainly not dare to do anything further. After all, the emperor's current strength is at the red dust immortal realm, so dealing with a great emperor would be a piece of cake. Meanwhile, with Chu Fan's arrival, the weaker alien demons were quickly dealt with by the group, leaving only the alien demon that was fighting against the 6th emperor of the human race. At this moment, Chu Fan was about to ask the emperor to deal with the alien demon, but after seeing the look in the emperor's eyes, he had a guess in his heart. Therefore, Chu Fan did not choose to ask the emperor to take action. Instead, he leisurely watched the 6th emperor of the human race. Then, the 6th emperor of the human race glanced at Chu Fan, slowly concealing the fervor in his eyes, before speaking earnestly to Chu Fan and the others. Leave here first. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a beam of light and headed into the distance. The 2 other great emperors beside him also disappeared without hesitation, transforming into 2 beams of light as well. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Fan followed the 6th emperor of the human race without the slightest hesitation, although both he and the emperor have some suspicions in their hearts. But Chu Fan still wanted to see what this 6th emperor was up to. Soon, Chu Fan followed the 6th emperor of the human race to a mountain peak. Here you can clearly see the ancient battlefield of the entire human race. At the same time, this place also exudes a very fierce aura. At this moment, the sixth emperor of the human race stared intently at Chu Fan. Then he clasped his hands in a fist and spoke slowly to Chu Fan. My name is Wang Tianlong. May I ask how you should address me, fellow Taoist? Then, the sixth emperor clasped his hands in a fist salute to Chu Fan, his eyes gleaming with excitement. However, he concealed the excitement in his eyes very well at this moment. He was Wang Tianlong of the Wang family, who was sent to the ancient battlefield of the human race by Emperor Wu, and was also the heavenly dragon emperor of the human race. Wang Tianlong, who had arrived at the ancient battlefield, continued to travel around it. That's how she met Chu Fan on this day. Upon hearing the name of the sixth emperor before him, Chu Fan slowly cupped his hands in a respectful gesture. Chu Fan, he is my follower named Emperor Zun, who has just broken through to the great emperor realm not long ago. Chu Fan then slowly spoke to Wang Tianlong in front of him, and after speaking, he pointed in the direction of the emperor. Although Chu Fan was still wary of Wang Tianlong at this moment, he did not hide his own name or the name of the emperor at all. After all, no one who has walked this ancient road knows their own name or the emperor's name. And even if they knew their names, they wouldn't take them seriously. Just as Chu Fan had expected, Wang Tianlong nodded at Chu Fan after hearing his words, not even bothering to glance at the emperor beside Chu Fan. After all, Chu Fan had said that the Emperor Venerable was only someone who had just broken through to the great emperor realm. If that's the case, then the emperor's strength is naturally not particularly great. As for the emperor, it was because he was originally at the red dust immortal realm. Therefore, he concealed his aura very well, and even a true immortal level expert could not sense his true cultivation level when he was around. Moreover, he was merely a minor sixth emperor. Of course, this only applies to the emperor. Then, Wang Tianlong slowly turned his gaze to Chu Fan again, this time with a hint of urgency in his eyes. Fellow Taoist Chu Fan, I know of a human emperor's inheritance, but unfortunately, this human emperor's inheritance can only be opened by the human emperor's law. So I would like to ask you to come with me to open this human emperor's inheritance. You only need to give me half of the human emperor's inheritance. I wonder if you would be willing to go with me. Then, Wang Tianlong spoke directly to Chu Fan without any hesitation. And after he finished speaking, he looked at Chu Fan with a hint of expectation in his eyes. At the same time, you can see a hint of wariness in Wang Tianlong's eyes. At this point, he had already decided that if Chu Fan didn't go, he would simply kidnap him. Even the two emperors from the Wang family beside him looked at Chu Fan with a hint of excitement in their eyes. Because as long as they obtain the human emperor's inheritance, they can dominate the entire ancient path of the human race. Then how could they possibly fear Emperor Wu of the human race in Zhengxian City? Upon hearing Wang Tianlong's words, Chu Fan's eyes lit up with excitement, and he slowly turned his gaze toward the emperor beside him. Clearly, he hadn't expected that the person in front of him knew about the place where the human emperor's inheritance had been, which he had been searching for so long. It instantly made him feel friendly. Then Chu Fan slowly looked at Wang Tianlong in front of him and said, I am willing to go with you, fellow Taoist. At the same time, I am also very curious about this so-called human emperor's inheritance. After he finished speaking, Chu Fan's eyes still held a hint of anticipation. Of course, his expectant look wasn't feigned, because he was genuinely very curious about this first human emperor. Therefore, at this time, he naturally had high expectations for the succession of this first human emperor. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Wang Tianlong's face instantly lit up with hope, and his eyes blazed with intense passion. Since fellow Taoist Chu Fan is willing to go, let's go now. Then, he spoke excitedly to Chu Fan, and after speaking, he looked directly into the distance. After hearing Wang Tianlong's words, Chu Fan nodded to him, and then calmly followed behind Wang Tianlong. After all, he was accompanied by two powerful, true immortals. Therefore, Chu Fan was naturally not afraid of Wang Tianlong in front of him. Moreover, the emperor alone can resolve all the current issues. Therefore, he is naturally not afraid to follow Wang Tianlong to the place of inheritance of the first human emperor. After traveling for several days, the group finally arrived at the very center of the ancient battlefield of the human race. White smoke filled the air. Even powerful beings at the level of emperors can easily lose their way inside. However, Wang Tianlong, who had reached the level of a sixth-generation emperor, had obviously been here before, so he did not have any expression on his face when he led the way. Instead, he easily led Chu Fan and the others to a valley. The valley here looks as if it were cleaved by a sword that fell from the sky. They looked incredibly small, standing in the valley. Chapter 867 The Land of the Human Emperor's Inheritance, Chu Fan's Transformation. Soon, Chu Fan followed Wang Tianlong and his group to the center of the valley. A huge stone statue stands in the very center of the valley. The stone statue has a golden appearance. The statue also holds a large seal in its hand. The terrifying aura of the human emperor's law still emanated from fashion. This caused the surrounding fog to slowly dissipate. As soon as Chu Fan and his group arrived, the power of the human emperor's law instantly enveloped them. At the same time, a golden light burst forth directly from the stone statue. Then, without any surprise, it landed on Chu Fan. Clearly, this stone statue also sensed the aura of the emperor's law within the body of the punishment. At this moment, Chu Fan also sensed the gentle aura emanating from the golden light emanating from the stone statue. Then I saw him looking at the stone statue with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. At this moment, Chu Fan was unaware that Wang Tianlong beside him had a gloomy look in his eyes, but this gloom was fleeting. Wang Tianlong was also extremely angry at this moment. He had been here more than once, but each time he came, the stone statue exerted a tremendous pressure on him. But Chu Fan had just arrived when the stone statue in front of him gave him such a benefit. This instantly made Wang Tianlong feel unbalanced. Of course, Chu Fan ignored Wang Tianlong's inner turmoil. At this moment, he looked at the dented area on the stone statue. At this moment, Chu Fan was very clear that the dented area was where he had placed the Golden Emperor's decree. However, at this time he did not choose to put the Emperor's decree directly into it. He wanted to see if Wang Tianlong, who was beside him, had any other way to unlock the human Emperor's inheritance. When Wang Tianlong saw the golden light in the center of the stone statue, a look of excitement instantly appeared on his face. Then he quickly pulled a golden token from his pocket. However, the light emanating from this golden token appeared somewhat subdued. Because Wang Tianlong's body contains no human emperor law, therefore, the golden light emanating from this token appeared quite faint. However, as this token slowly entered the statue of the human emperor, at that moment, the statue of the human emperor suddenly burst forth with a golden light. The golden light enveloped everyone present. Then everyone was taken away by the golden light. Soon, the group appeared outside a golden palace. Of course, most importantly, this golden palace is extremely dazzling. He seemed to stand tall in the sky. Outside this golden palace is a row of countless steps. Obviously, one must climb these steps to enter this golden palace. Having already entered the human emperor's secret realm, Chu Fan naturally had no intention of continuing to walk with Wang Tianlong in front of him. Instead, Chu Fan led the emperor beside him and slowly stepped onto the steps in front of him. However, the moment they stepped onto the stairs, Chu Fan instantly sensed the terrifying aura emanating from a staircase. Fortunately, due to the presence of the human emperor's law, this terrifying pressure vanished instantly. So Chu Fan slowly began to climb. Meanwhile, the emperor beside him slowly moved forward. Although there was an extremely terrifying pressure inside these steps, constantly pressing down on the group. However, the emperor's strength has reached the level of a mortal immortal. Therefore, it is naturally very easy for him to resist these pressures now. So Chu Fan led the emperor slowly toward the palace. Upon seeing this, Wang Tianlong and his two companions entered the stairs without hesitation. However, the moment they stepped onto the stairs, the three of them felt a terrifying and different sensation. Even Wang Tianlong, who had already reached the level of a sixth-generation emperor, felt this terrifying pressure. His face instantly showed a look of astonishment as he stared at Chu Fan and the emperor in front of him. Because at this moment, he felt that Chu Fan and the emperor were not exerting any pressure on them. Damn it, could it be because of the human emperor's law? But why is the one next to him also rising upwards, as if he has no pressure? At this moment, Wang Tianlong was also extremely angry and roaring in his heart. However, he was also very curious as to why the emperor could ascend to the top so quickly. However, he soon realized that the emperor venerable must also be cultivating the human emperor's law. So he continued upwards with some reluctance, although these pressures were extremely powerful for him. However, Wang Tianlong has no intention of giving up this inheritance of the human emperor. Meanwhile, Chu Fan and the emperor continued their journey towards the Golden Palace. The oppressive aura here seemed to have no effect on the two of them. Even so, their speed wasn't particularly fast. Moreover, the golden steps here seemed to be endless. Half a month passed quickly. In the past 2 weeks, Chu Fan and the emperor have completely widened the gap between themselves and Wang Tianlong and the others. At this point, Chu Fan and the emperor had traveled about halfway. As Chu Fan and the emperor's speed increased, Chu Fan also felt that the aura of the yellow law within his body was constantly increasing. It felt as if the golden aura around him was constantly flowing into his body. This caused the golden aura within his body to slowly increase. The human emperor's law instantly increased several times over. At this moment, his aura was continuously transforming towards that of the fourth emperor. Chu Fan was not far from becoming a fourth-generation human emperor. Here, constantly strengthened by the laws of the human emperor, he was naturally undergoing a rapid transformation. Another month passed. Chu Fan and the emperor finally appeared outside the Golden Palace. However, at this time, Chu Fan and the emperor were still some distance away from the Golden Palace. Moreover, Chu Fan and the emperor also stopped at this moment. It's not that the two are unable to continue forward. The main reason was that the Golden Emperor's law emanating from Chu Fan enveloped his entire body. He is about to undergo the transformation. In other words, Chu Fan is about to become a fourth-generation emperor. Therefore, the two of them now have to stop what they've been doing. The emperor then sat cross-legged next to Chu Fan. Clearly, at this moment, he intended to stay here and protect Chu Fan's transformation. Meanwhile, the aura of the yellow law within Chu Fan's body continued to strengthen. The golden light of the human emperor's law enveloped Chu Fan like a silkworm cocoon. A tremendous transformation was about to begin. Chapter 868 Wang Tianlong's Jealousy and Killing Intent, breaking through the fourth generation of human emperor. At this moment, Chu Fan, who was undergoing a transformation, was also experiencing significant changes. His transformation from the human emperor realm to that of a great emperor-level powerhouse is not particularly similar. For a powerful being at the great emperor level to break through from the third great emperor to the fourth great emperor, a massive nirvana is required, and this is similar for the human emperor realm. However, the aura emanating from Chu Fan has now reached an extremely terrifying level, far surpassing that of ordinary fifth emperors. It should be noted that Chu Fan is currently only a third-generation human emperor. Even if the human emperor realm allows one to fight beyond their level, Chu Fan's current combat strength should only be that of a fourth-generation human emperor. However, his strength far exceeded that level. Moreover, at this moment, the terrifying golden human emperor law within Chu Fan's body was constantly undergoing transformation, unlike that of a true human emperor realm expert. Chu Fan's human emperor law carries the aura of many heavenly emperor laws. This is something that no human emperor in history has ever seen before, because the human emperor and the heavenly emperor are two separate cases. If you want to cultivate the human emperor's law, you cannot cultivate the heavenly emperor's law. Conversely, if you want to cultivate the heavenly emperor's law, you cannot cultivate the human emperor's law. Of course, this legendary heavenly emperor law even surpasses the human emperor law, and even Chu Fan has never heard of anyone cultivating the heavenly emperor law. He only learned about the existence of the heavenly emperor's law within the system space. For example, there was a character in a novel he once read who said, "I am the heavenly emperor, and I shall suppress all enemies." While Chu Fan was undergoing a continuous transformation, Wang Tianlong and the others below also began to climb. Although neither of them cultivated the human emperor's law, Wang Tianlong's strength had already reached the level of a sixth emperor, so the pressure of the human emperor's inheritance could not completely stop him. He is still heading towards Chu Fan. However, the other two emperors were stunned by this terrifying pressure. It is extremely difficult for them to take a step forward now. Clearly, the immense pressure was far beyond their ability to withstand. At this moment, Wang Tianlong slowly raised his head and looked in Chu Fan's direction, a strong killing intent flashing in his eyes. However, he quickly concealed the murderous intent in his eyes, because he is still in the human emperor's secret realm. Therefore, he knew that he could not harm Chu Fan at the moment, and more importantly, he wanted to obtain the inheritance of the first human emperor from Chu Fan. Therefore, he can only suppress his dissatisfaction and anger. Then it continued upwards. Time passed little by little, and a month went by in the blink of an eye. During this month, Wang Tianlong continued to climb. However, the further they went, the slower Wang Tianlong's pace became. However, he is not particularly far from Chu Fan's location now. I believe he will be able to reach Chu Fan's current location in a few months. Meanwhile, the golden cocoon where Chu Fan was located was constantly emitting the aura of the terrifying human emperor's law. At the same time, the emperor beside Chu Fan also opened his eyes. Then, with a hint of curiosity in his eyes, he looked at the golden light in front of him, because he already knew that his emperor had successfully undergone nirvana. For an ordinary person to successfully achieve nirvana, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. Even for the most extraordinary person, it would take at least thousands of years to truly achieve nirvana. However, this time Chu Fan's successful rebirth only took 1 month. This naturally shocked the emperor. Although the place where Chu Fan is undergoing nirvana is indeed of great help to those who cultivate the laws of the human emperor. However, if someone who usually cultivates the laws of the human emperor were to attempt nirvana here, it would take at least several years or even decades to successfully achieve nirvana. Moreover, they must be the most outstanding talents. Therefore, Chu Fan's 1-month trial naturally shocked the emperor. Despite his shock, the emperor still looked at Wang Tianlong below with a calm expression. During this time, he could naturally feel the envy and murderous intent in Wang Tianlong's eyes. However, the emperor had no intention of dealing with Wang Tianlong, because Wang Tianlong is still just an ant in his eyes. Moreover, he was unaware of Wang Tianlong's true purpose. Therefore, the emperor wanted to take this opportunity to see Wang Tianlong's true intentions. Anyway, keeping an ant that can't hurt you won't cause too much of a problem. Meanwhile, Chu Fan, who had successfully undergone nirvana, was experiencing a continuous beating of his golden heart. Each jump caused the space to shake violently. It was as if his heart was the sole master of this world. With his heart pounding, the terrifying aura emanating from Chu Fan gradually subsided. At the same time, the flesh and blood on his body, which had been reduced to nothing but bones, was constantly recovering. Soon he stepped directly into the realm of the 4th-generation human emperor. In other words, he has now successfully reached a new level. He has taken another step closer to the legendary realm of true immortals. However, Chu Fan will not choose to break through to the true immortal realm until he finds the path to the immortal realm. Because if he could, he would choose to break through to the realm of the immortal of the mortal world. Because the combat power of a strong person in the mortal immortal realm is greater than that of a strong person in the true immortal realm. Take, for example, the current emperor and the true dragon within their great Xia Empire. Although the emperor's strength was only at the 2nd level of the mortal immortal realm. However, his strength is no weaker than that of an ordinary true immortal at the 4th level. Of course, even true dragons are within the realm of true immortals. But he is the leader of the 10 fiends. Therefore, within the realm of true immortals, he was an invincible being among those of the same realm. After his realm stabilized, he became the 4th human emperor. Chu Fan slowly opened his eyes at this moment. Then he leisurely turned his gaze to the golden palace in front of him. At this moment, he had actually completed the breakthrough. So naturally, he would choose to enter this palace to see what the legacy left by the 1st emperor was. At the same time, he also wanted to see how the 1st human emperor led a force to enter the legendary immortal realm. It's possible for someone to ascend to immortality. However, it becomes somewhat difficult for someone with a powerful faction to ascend. After all, this is a promotion for the entire teaching profession. Then Chu Fan nodded to the emperor beside him. Without the slightest hesitation, he walked directly toward the Golden Palace gates. As he arrived before the Golden Palace gates, an extremely terrifying aura of the human emperor's law erupted from the Golden Palace. However, after sensing the aura of the human emperor's law emanating from Chu Fan, the terrifying aura gradually faded away. Chapter 869, The First Human Emperor's Dharma Body, The Path to Human Emperor Severed. The moment the aura that violated the pure laws of the human emperor slowly landed on the Golden Palace gates in front of them, the Golden Palace gates began to tremble slightly for a moment. Then the 2 golden doors opened directly. An ancient aura emanated from the Golden Palace. At this moment, Chu Fan also sensed an extremely attractive aura emanating from the Golden Palace, drawing him ever closer to it. However, at this moment, the emperor beside Chu Fan frowned. Then, he looked at Chu Fan beside him with a serious expression and said, "Your Majesty, there's an extremely terrifying aura inside. The owner of this aura is at least at the 1st level of true immortal, and with the blessing of this palace, his combat power is no weaker than mine." After speaking, the emperor looked at the Golden Palace in front of him with a hint of worry in his eyes, because it could clearly sense the terrifying aura emanating from within that Golden Palace. You should know that he is now capable of fighting against a true immortal at the 4th level. Even so, he could still sense that the terrifying aura within this palace was no weaker than his own, which showed that the owner of that aura within the palace was quite powerful. Let's go straight in. I believe there's no danger inside. Chu Fan then looked at the emperor beside him and said, although the owner of this aura is no weaker than the emperor, the fact that the emperor did not let it fade away means that his strength is such that he cannot defeat the owner of this aura. But he was still able to withstand the aura of its owner. Even if there is a crisis, the 2 of them will be able to escape. The emperor nodded after hearing Chu Fan's words. Without any hesitation, the 2 stepped directly into the palace. Of course, it was more difficult for the emperor to enter this palace than for Chu Fan. After all, Chu Fan already possessed the human emperor's law, so it would naturally be easier for him to enter this palace. The emperor, on the other hand, forced his way into the palace using his own strength. As the 2 entered the palace, Wang Tianlong below could no longer conceal the murderous intent in his eyes, and he glared angrily at the direction of the Golden Palace. Then he slowly exhaled. Resources that are not rightfully yours will never belong to you. I'll leave them with you for now and let you keep them for me for a while." Then he slowly looked at the golden palace and spoke, then stopped in his tracks, not intending to move forward. After all, he could feel an extremely terrifying pressure pressing down on him after the golden palace gates opened. It made it extremely difficult for him to take another step forward. Therefore, he naturally did not choose to continue forward at this point. Instead, they wanted to wait for Chu Fan to bring out the legacy of the first human emperor. Then, relying on his strength, he snatched the inheritance of the first human emperor from Chu Fan's hands. Of course, all of this was just his own opinion. If Chu Fan knew what he was thinking, he would definitely sneer. After all, how dare a mere sixth emperor set his sights on him? Meanwhile, Chu Fan and the emperor had already arrived at the palace. At this moment, Chu Fan and the emperor stood before a magnificent hall. However, the hall looked somewhat desolate. Or perhaps it's because no one has lived here for a long time. This hall looks very cold and desolate. However, the terrifying aura of his emperor's law continued to permeate the entire palace. Chu Fan and the emperor slowly walked forward. Soon the two arrived at the very center of the main hall. At this moment, the two people in the very center of the hall could clearly see the golden figure sitting directly above them. However, the aura emanating from this golden figure was terrifying. However, it's clear that he's currently in a deep sleep. Seeing this, Chu Fan looked at the golden figure with some confusion. He wasn't wearing the golden armor that Chu Fan was wearing. Instead, they wore golden imperial robes like earthly emperors. As Chu Fan and his companion slowly approached the center of the main hall, the golden figure in front of him also slowly moved his body. His eyes, which held the terrifying starlight, suddenly opened. At the same time, the aura of the human emperor's law emanating from him directly attacked Chu Fan's direction. Sensing this scene, Chu Fan instantly released the terrifying aura of the human emperor's law emanating from his body. The man looked at the golden figure with a hint of surprise in his eyes. After truly sensing the aura of the human emperor's law emanating from Chu Fan, the golden figure slowly withdrew its aura. Then he calmly looked at Chu Fan. "I didn't expect so much time to have passed in the blink of an eye, but thankfully some people in later generations are able to cultivate the human emperor's law." As his gaze returned, a voice, seemingly emanating from the heavens, slowly resounded throughout the entire hall. The voice carried an endless sense of vicissitude and helplessness. In addition to the sense of vicissitude and helplessness, one can also hear a hint of loneliness. Upon hearing this voice, Chu Fan slowly raised his head and looked at the golden figure, clearly curious as to why the golden figure appeared so forlorn. However, your ability to cultivate the human emperor's law is a variable in this world. After all, the path to becoming the human emperor has been cut off, and being able to cultivate to this level can be said to indicate that your talent is exceptional, or perhaps you are not even from this world. Before Chu Fan could ask anything, the voice, seemingly from the heavens above, continued to resound. At the same time, the golden figure in front of him also turned his gaze directly to the emperor beside Chu Fan. Clearly, at this point, he also discovered the emperor's true cultivation level. However, at this moment he had no intention of making a move against the emperor. The path to becoming the human emperor is severed. What do you mean by this, senior? At this moment, Chu Fan stepped forward and asked the golden figure in front of him, not expecting that the golden figure, who was suspected to be the first human emperor, would say such a thing. At the same time, Chu Fan also had some guesses in his mind. Aside from the former Emperor Xian Yuan, Chu Fan had never heard of anyone who could cultivate the emperor's laws. Even the most prodigious geniuses couldn't do that. Even the exceptionally talented individual from the Xian Yuan family could only cultivate the human king law, which was below the human emperor law. This shows that the human emperor's law has enormous constraints. The main reason he was able to cultivate the human emperor's law was because of his system, and his descendants had already cultivated the human emperor's law. Chapter 872 Methods to Enter the Immortal Realm. The ultimate immortal path and the end of the path to immortality. If the path to becoming the human emperor is truly cut off, wouldn't it be very difficult for Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran to advance on their path to becoming emperor? It should be noted that Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran have already reached the quasi-emperor and great sage realms, respectively, and they are about to break through to the human emperor realm. If they really can't break through, wouldn't that be utterly hopeless for Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran? However, Chu Fan would absolutely not allow Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran to fail in their breakthroughs. Even if he has to do everything in his power, he will ensure that Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran succeed in their breakthroughs. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the golden figure sighed silently once again. Then, his gaze seemed to pierce through the river of time, looking towards the ancient past, before he slowly continued to speak. The human emperor's law originated with me. Or rather, I am the representative of the human emperor's law, because there was no human emperor's law before me, which is why I am the first human emperor. After the first human emperor told Chu Fan about what had happened and about the human emperor's law, Chu Fan finally understood why the human emperor's law had been severed. It turns out that the human emperor's law was created by the first human emperor in front of us. Of course, the human emperor's law that was formed at that time was not called the human emperor's law, but rather the invincible law. It wasn't until later, when he united the entire celestial empire, that he successfully became the human emperor. Later, he even became the supreme ruler of that era by relying on the human emperor's law. At the same time, many powerful figures at the level of emperors also fell to him. It was also during that era that he embarked on the path to invincibility by relying on the human emperor's law. Then he successfully became the emperor of humanity in that era. He became the first powerful being in all the heavens to break through to the human emperor realm. After breaking through to the human emperor realm, his strength continued to increase. In the millions of years that followed, many people in his era also cultivated the laws of the human emperor. However, although many cultivators have emerged who practice the laws of the human emperor, the number of powerful individuals who have successfully reached the human emperor realm is not particularly large. Even so, the number of powerful individuals who reached the human emperor realm in that era reached several dozen. This is unprecedented. Even Chu Fan was extremely shocked when he heard this news. Even in his current era, he is the only one who has truly broken through to the human emperor realm. Although the Taiyan human emperor and the Taiyang human emperor are both beings at the human emperor realm, these two human emperors were summoned by Chu Fan, and to be precise, they're not people from this world. Therefore, neither of them could be considered to have broken through to the level of human emperor in this world. Even in the tens of millions of years that followed, only one human emperor, Xin Yuan, emerged, so the human emperor realm has always been considered taboo. Now, after hearing the words of the first human emperor, he understood why the human emperor realm was so difficult to break through. As the number of human emperor realms created by this first human emperor continued to increase, the heavenly Tao of this world began to restrict the human emperor realms. Later, because this first human emperor wanted to lead the entire celestial dynasty to the immortal realm, the heavens sent down countless lightning tribulations. Although the first human emperor ultimately led his celestial dynasty into the legendary immortal realm, this also incurred the wrath of the heavenly Tao regarding the human emperor's law, and at the same time, made the heavenly Tao want to completely change the human emperor's law. Fortunately, the first human emperor left behind a path of human emperor laws. This is why Chu Fan was able to break through to the human emperor realm. Even so, the path to becoming the human emperor was cut off. When the first human emperor spoke of this, there was a hint of emotion in his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that he had created so many human emperors in the past. Therefore, the path to becoming the human emperor cannot be severed. It could even be said that the path of the human emperor and the path of the great emperor are exactly the same, because the former emperor was just like the human emperor. Soon, the first human emperor told Chu Fan all the reasons why the path to becoming a human emperor had been severed. After listening, Chu Fan slowly turned his gaze to the first human emperor in front of him. Although the path to becoming the human emperor may have been severed, it wouldn't be a big problem for him, even if it were. Because once he breaks through to the immortal realm, he can go to the legendary immortal realm. At that time, he can naturally complete the path to becoming the human emperor and continue his cultivation in the immortal realm. Your strength has now reached the level of a 4-generation great emperor. No, it should be said that your strength is now that of a 4-generation human emperor. So, as long as you break through to the true immortal realm, you can force the rules of this world to move to the immortal realm. At this moment, the first human emperor slowly turned his gaze to Chu Fan, a hint of joy in his eyes. Clearly, he had not expected that a 4th-generation human emperor would appear before him, and that this 4th-generation human emperor's talent and strength far exceeded his imagination. Senior, how can I break through the rules of this world and travel to the immortal realm? At this moment, Chu Fan looked at the first human emperor in front of him with a hint of doubt and asked, because even the emperor and others could not sense the existence of the immortal realm. From then on, Chu Fan became very curious about the immortal realm. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the first human emperor glanced at the emperor beside Chu Fan before slowly continuing to speak. There are strong rules binding this world and the immortal realm. It is not as simple as one might imagine to successfully break through from this world to another. Although he used the mortal world to become an immortal and reach the realm of mortal immortal, he still cannot sense the existence of the immortal realm with his current strength. At this moment, the first human emperor also shook his head at the emperor. He could naturally see that the emperor had walked the path of becoming an immortal in the mortal world with great perseverance. The first human emperor had seen this path before, But becoming an immortal in the mortal world and entering the immortal realm was not so simple. There are two ways to truly enter the immortal realm. One is to reach the end of the mortal immortal realm. That is, when you reach the 9th level of the mortal immortal realm, you can sense the immortal realm. This is because after breaking through to the 9th level of the mortal immortal realm, you can sense the next realm, and the next realm is considered to be among the top experts in the entire immortal realm. So you can naturally sense the existence of the immortal realm. The second method is to wait for the path to immortality to open. Although the path to immortality is not the correct path, it does have a correct endpoint. As long as you are strong enough, you can break open the gate to the immortal realm at the end of the path to immortality. At that time, you can enter the immortal realm by relying on the path to immortality. However, it is best to use this method when you are strong enough, because at the end of the path to immortality, there are true immortals in the immortal realm who are reaping the lives of all beings in the myriad realms. At this time, the first human emperor also told Chu Fan about the path to immortality and how to enter the immortal realm. Chu Fan was stunned after hearing the words of the first human emperor. He never imagined that the so-called path to immortality would be like this. Chapter 871, The Realm Divisions of the Immortal Realm, Top-Tier Powerhouses, Immortal Kings and Giants. At this moment, Chu Fan's face showed a hint of surprise. Clearly, he hadn't expected that truly entering the immortal realm would be so complicated. Of course, if one were to become an immortal in the mortal world and reach the 9th level of the mortal immortal realm before entering the immortal realm, it is unknown how long that would take. Although Chu Fan now possesses the Time Pagoda, the flow of time inside the Time Pagoda far exceeds that outside, allowing Chu Fan to grow rapidly. However, Chu Fan also discovered the Time Pagoda at this time. Although it could help him grow quickly, its effectiveness decreased as his cultivation level increased, because the flow rate of the Time Pagoda is the same as the flow rate of this world. The Time Pagoda simply accelerated time in this world. If the Time Pagoda were in the immortal realm, it would be a tremendous boost for Chu Fan and his companions. Unfortunately, the Time Pagoda is currently located in their world. Therefore, it is still somewhat difficult for them to quickly cultivate and improve their strength within the Time Pagoda. For example, the current cultivation speed of the Great Xia Empire's powerful figures, such as Kuanping and Emperor Zun, who have reached the true immortal level, is extremely slow inside the Time Tower. It would take them at least tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, to break through a minor realm. It's important to understand that the time here refers to external time. Perhaps this time is not long for those true immortal level powerhouses, but it is far too long for Chu Fan. After all, he hadn't been in this world for very long. As for why the Emperor has now broken through to the 2nd level of the mortal immortal realm, it's mainly because he was already close to the 2nd level of the mortal immortal realm at the beginning. Therefore, he has naturally broken through to the 2nd level of the mortal immortal realm. However, it will take him even longer to break through to the 3rd level. Of course, if you have a large number of true immortal level beings behind you, then you can also open a passage to the immortal realm directly with your powerful strength. Moreover, as long as you have enough true immortal level beings, your situation will not be particularly bad after you arrive in the immortal realm. The first human emperor, seeing Chu Fan deep in thought, spoke again slowly, a complex expression on his face, because the first human emperor used this method to travel to the immortal realm. However, what remains in this palace now is his physical form. This can be considered his last legacy left in this world. I wonder how you're doing in the immortal realm now, senior. At this moment, Chu Fan directly asked the first human emperor in front of him, since the first human emperor was originally from this world, and perhaps he could get the first human emperor's help if he went to the immortal realm. You little rascal, do you want me to help you? Actually, I pay attention to anyone who ascends from the lower realm. However, my current faction is facing a huge crisis, so I can't help you people who have ascended from the lower realm. More importantly, the crisis I face is more terrifying than you can imagine. At this moment, the first human emperor finally showed a smile on his face. Then, he slowly spoke to Chu Fan, and after speaking, the smile on his face turned into melancholy. Clearly, he himself is now in a precarious situation. Chu Fan nodded after hearing the words of the first human emperor, a look of helplessness appearing on his face. At first, he thought the first human emperor could give him some help. However, it now seems that if anyone knew he had a connection with the first human emperor, he would likely be implicated as well. I am not in the immortal realm right now, because there's another world outside the immortal realm. However, this world is very chaotic. If you successfully enter the immortal realm, you should try to establish yourself there as soon as possible. The power dynamics in the immortal realm are more complex than you imagine. The first human emperor then slowly spoke to Chu Fan again, and after he finished speaking, a hint of anger appeared in his eyes. He was clearly furious with the forces in the immortal realm. Are there many powerful beings above the true immortal level in the current immortal realm? Chu Fan then looked at the first human emperor in front of him with a serious expression and said, since this first human emperor cannot help them, now he also wants to know the specific situation in the immortal realm. He also wants to know the true strength of the top experts in the immortal realm. That way, he'll have a way to deal with things when he enters the immortal realm in the future. Currently, the strongest beings in the immortal realm are immortal king giants. Above the mortal immortal realm is the immortal king realm, and the immortal king realm is further divided into ordinary immortal kings, supreme immortal kings, and immortal king giants. At present, there are 7 immortal king giants in the entire immortal realm, dozens of supreme immortal kings, and hundreds of ordinary immortal kings. However, as long as your force has 1 immortal king, it is already considered a top force in the immortal realm. At this moment, the first human emperor also knew that Chu Fan was unaware of the division of realms in the immortal realm, so he slowly explained the division of strength in the immortal realm. At the same time, it also revealed the most powerful combat force in the immortal realm. It turns out that there are now 7 great immortal kings in the immortal realm. These 7 celestial kings are the most powerful beings in the celestial realm. Chu Fan nodded after hearing the words of the first human emperor. At that moment, he also realized what was happening. The division of the immortal realm was roughly the same as what he had in mind, because the novel he read last time contained information about the classification of immortal kings. However, in the classification of immortal kings, the immortal realm is missing 1 supreme giant. It seems there are no supreme giants in this world. I understand. Thank you for informing me about the immortal realm. At this moment, Chu Fan cupped his hands in greeting to the first human emperor before leisurely turning his gaze forward. There was no worry in his eyes at that moment. Instead, he became extremely sharp and confident. After all, there are no true immortal kings in the current Great Xia Empire. However, Chu Fan believed that even if their Great Xia Empire did not have a celestial king-level existence before Qin Xianlu arrived, it should at least have a red dust immortal ninth heaven or a true immortal ninth heaven existence. Of course, it would be difficult for them to break through by relying on the true dragons, since the true dragons that Chu Fan has summoned over the years have reached the level of the 8th level of true immortal. However, it would take him at least several million years to truly break through to the level of an ordinary immortal king. Chu Fan doesn't have time to wait here for millions of years. You can find out about these things when you go to the immortal realm. I'm just informing you about things in the immortal realm in advance. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the first human emperor shook his head, then slowly turned his gaze back to Chu Fan. Then he looked at Chu Fan very seriously. Chapter 872, The Legacy of the First Human Emperor, the Human Emperor's Essence Blood, and a Broken Immortal Weapon. However, a look of satisfaction quickly flashed in his eyes. He was clearly very satisfied with Chu Fan now. Your talent is terrifying. Even I, in the past, cannot compare to you now. Therefore, I have high hopes for you. Now, absorb the legacy I left behind. Although the legacy I left behind is only at the level of immortal, it should be able to help you grow rapidly. The first human emperor then slowly pointed a finger at Chu Fan. Then a golden light entered Chu Fan's mind. The next second, a scripture appeared directly in Chu Fan's mind. This scripture is the cultivation method practiced by the first human emperor. There is no connection between the name and the emperor. It's actually called the Starry Sky Overlord Body Technique. When you circulate this technique, you can absorb the stars from all the heavens and myriad realms and use those stars to enhance your strength. This technique can be described as extremely domineering. The second item was about the national destiny law for forging the Immortal Dynasty, but it wasn't of much use to Chu Fan. Because he now possesses a system, he naturally doesn't need this particular cultivation technique to enhance his country's fortune. The third item was an introduction to the immortal realm. Although Chu Fan had just learned about the cultivation levels and top experts in the immortal realm. However, this information also gave him a better understanding of the immortal realm. There are also many things about the world outside the immortal realm. For example, the celestial realm has a formidable enemy. This formidable enemy is the Dark Abyss, the antithesis of the celestial realm. The reason why it's called the Dark Abyss wasn't mentioned in the information passed down to Chu Fan by the first human emperor. Chu Fan quickly absorbed all the information in his mind. Although he was somewhat surprised that the first human emperor in front of him did not give him the cultivation method for human emperors, his face still did not show much emotion. The path to becoming the human emperor must be created by oneself. If you follow my path, your ultimate achievement will never surpass mine. Therefore, I have not left behind my cultivation techniques. At this moment, the first human emperor seemed to see through Chu Fan's thoughts. He shook his head at Chu Fan and then slowly looked at the golden chair behind him. If other geniuses who cultivate the laws of the human emperor appeared here, he might pass on his cultivation methods and techniques to that genius. However, Chu Fan's talent has already surpassed his. Therefore, the first human emperor did not intend for Chu Fan to follow his own path. In that case, Chu Fan might surpass him when he grows up in the future. Chu Fan nodded after hearing the words of the first human emperor. Clearly, he now understood the meaning behind the first emperor's words. Moreover, he did not need the cultivation techniques of the first human emperor. The cultivation technique he is currently practicing is already extremely domineering. Besides the Devouring Heaven Demon Art, he also cultivated the Heavenly Emperor scripture. It can be said that every technique he practiced was top-notch. Moreover, his self-created techniques are constantly being improved. Therefore, Chu Fan believed that the cultivation technique he created would definitely surpass the one created by the first human emperor. After the first human emperor saw that Chu Fan understood his thoughts, he nodded to Chu Fan and then waved behind him. The next second, 2 orbs of light appeared in front of him. One of the orbs of light emitted a terrifying golden glow. At the same time, Chu Fan could also sense that there was a very attractive aura within this golden light. This very attractive aura is the same aura I sense in the outside world. Chu Fan immediately turned his gaze to the golden ball of light. At this moment, he could see a drop of golden essence blood within the golden orb of light, and this drop of essence blood seemed to be constantly pulsating. At the same time, a terrifying power was constantly being emanating from it. It was as if a true human emperor stood within the essence of blood. This is the essence blood left behind after my breakthrough to the red dust immortal realm. You can absorb it now, or you can keep it and unleash its power when you encounter a crisis. This way, you can experience the strength of the red dust immortal realm in advance. Without the slightest hesitation, the first human emperor pushed the drop of blood essence directly in front of Chu Fan, his eyes showing a hint of relief. He also revealed the true purpose of this drop of essence. Chu Fan nodded after hearing the words of the first human emperor, and then he directly put away the drop of essence blood. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the second treasure. The first human emperor's gaze also fell upon the second ball of light. Inside here is a celestial weapon used to suppress fortune. However, because of my battle with the immortals of the celestial realm during my tribulation, this celestial weapon has been damaged. If you want to use it to suppress fortune, you need to repair it in advance. The first human emperor spoke with a touch of nostalgia, then slowly pushed the ball of light in his hand towards Chu Fan. Then, a large cauldron slowly emerged from the ball of light. The large cauldron radiated a silvery white and golden light. At the same time, the primordial energy also emanated from the cauldron. Although it was broken by that war, but it still far surpasses ordinary ultimate imperial weapons. Chu Fan nodded to the first human emperor upon seeing this scene. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he put the large cauldron away. Of course, Chu Fan doesn't need to use it to suppress the fortune of the Great Xia Empire now. After all, Chu Fan already possessed the human emperor's sword. Therefore, he naturally did not need anything else to suppress the fortune of the Great Xia Empire. However, this large cauldron may still be of great use to him. After all, wasn't the weapon used by the former Emperor Yi a large cauldron? I have already given you the legacy I left behind. The rest of the journey is up to you. But be careful of those guys in the immortal realm when you're undergoing the immortal tribulation of the mortal world. The immortal realm will take notice of you because the cultivators of the human emperor law undergoing the immortal tribulation of the mortal world are far more numerous than those cultivators of other laws undergoing the immortal tribulation of the mortal world. The first human emperor slowly turned his gaze to Chu Fan again, and then he spoke to Chu Fan very seriously. Clearly, he had encountered those true immortals from the celestial realm when he was undergoing his tribulation. Therefore, he is now passing on his experience to Chu Fan. Chu Fan nodded seriously after hearing the words of the first human emperor. Although his undergoing the mortal tribulation might attract the attention of those guys in the immortal realm. But Chu Fan was not afraid at all. Chapter 873 Wang Tianlong, Courting Death, seizes the inheritance of the first human emperor. Moreover, it will be a long time before he breaks through to the red dust immortal realm. More importantly, Chu Fan might not necessarily choose to break through to the mortal immortal realm. If the Great Xia Empire is strong enough, then Chu Fan will choose to lead the people of the Great Xia Empire directly to the immortal realm via the path to immortality. In that case, he would choose to break through to the true immortal realm in the immortal realm. After all, the true immortal realm and the mortal immortal realm are both transitional stages. His true target is the Celestial King, the most powerful Celestial King at the very top. However, if the Great Xia Empire is not strong enough, then Chu Fan will naturally choose to break through to the red dust immortal realm in the lower realm. In this way, he can also use the red dust immortal realm to continuously hone his strength in this world. He will go to the immortal realm when he truly reaches the 9th level of the mortal immortal realm. He believed that by then, the Great Xia Empire would be incredibly powerful, and even facing a true immortal king wouldn't be so difficult. The first human emperor nodded in relief upon seeing Chu Fan's appearance. Then his avatar began to slowly dissipate. Let me lend you one last helping hand. At the same time, his voice slowly emanated, and his Dharma body instantly transformed into beams of golden light that rushed into Chu Fan's body. After feeling this terrifying power coming into his body, a look of surprise instantly appeared on Chu Fan's face. However, at this moment, he quickly used the Devouring Heaven Demon Art within his body to devour this golden power. His strength quickly began to grow. In just a moment, his strength more than doubled. Finally, the golden light dissipated and disappeared. Chu Fan's strength has also improved further. Although he has not yet reached the level of 5th-generation human emperor, he can sense that this golden light has reduced his lifespan by tens of thousands of years. In other words, this golden light saved him tens of thousands of years of cultivation time. Before long, he'll be able to undergo another rebirth and become a being of the 5th generation of human emperor level. Feeling the terrifying power within his body, Chu Fan cupped his hands in a respectful gesture towards the palace. As Chu Fan received the human emperor's inheritance, the golden palace began to slowly dissipate. Then, the sight of the first human emperor's inheritance slowly transformed into a golden light and dissipated into the world. It was as if the place of the first emperor's succession had never existed. At this moment, Wang Tianlong and the other 2 emperors of the Wang family, who were still climbing, also appeared in a valley. At this moment, there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. However, a hint of excitement soon appeared on Wang Tianlong's face. He stared at Chu Fan with a murderous intent in his eyes. He quickly arrived at Chu Fan's side, releasing the aura of a 6th-generation emperor without any concealment. Hand over the human emperor's legacy, and I will spare your life. Otherwise, you will perish here. Then, Wang Tianlong looked at Chu Fan with an arrogant expression and spoke. After he finished speaking, a terrifying sense of pressure emanated from him and swept over Chu Fan. Meanwhile, the 2 emperors of the Wang family still looked at Chu Fan with smiles on their faces. At the same time, their smiles were filled with excitement. They were clearly very excited about the prospect of receiving the emperor's legacy. So you originally wanted to obtain the human emperor's inheritance, but because you don't have the human emperor's laws, that's why you came to me, right? At this moment, Chu Fan showed no panic on his face. Instead, he looked at Wang Tianlong in front of him with a calm expression and spoke. At the same time, he understood why Wang Tianlong had chosen to bring him to the human emperor's inheritance ground. Not bad, you're not stupid. But even if you guessed it, so what? You only have 2 choices now. Either hand over the human emperor's inheritance or perish here. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Wang Tianlong nodded directly to Chu Fan, then looked at Chu Fan arrogantly and said. After he finished speaking, the burning light in his eyes was undisguised as he looked directly at Chu Fan. Are you so sure you've got me figured out? Chu Fan shook his head at Wang Tianlong and said that he didn't intend to pay any more attention to Wang Tianlong. Instead, he nodded to the emperor beside him. Then, the emperor instantly exuded an aura belonging to the immortal realm of the mortal world. A terrifying aura instantly enveloped the 3 emperors of the Wang family. The faces of Wang Tianlong and the 2 emperors of the Wang family, who had been wearing an air of arrogance and confidence, instantly turned to shock. They hadn't expected that the seemingly ordinary emperor before them would possess such terrifying strength. Who are you? How can your strength be so terrifying? At this moment, Wang Tianlong looked at the emperor with shock in his eyes and spoke. After he finished speaking, a sense of helplessness and anger arose in his heart. However, at this point, he was somewhat helpless, because he discovered that the emperor in front of him seemed to be even stronger than the martial emperor of the human race. I am the emperor, and you know my name before you die, which is already a favor to you. At this moment, the emperor slowly spoke to Wang Tianlong, and after speaking, he took a step forward. The moment the aura of a mortal immortal erupted, this world was plunged into complete chaos. The terrifying aura instantly caused the surrounding space to explode. It was as if the power of the river of time was constantly hindering the emperor's progress. However, the emperor ignored them and stared at Wang Tianlong and the other 2 in front of him. Search the souls. I want to see where these 3 guys come from. Just as the emperor was about to make his move, Chu Fan slowly spoke to the emperor and gave him his instructions. Of course, Chu Fan did not intend to do it himself. even when facing two emperors from the Wang family who were weaker than himself. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the emperor nodded and then quickly stretched out a large hand forward. The terrifying force crushed forward. In an instant, it reached out and grabbed at Wang Tianlong and the other two emperors of the Wang family. Upon witnessing this scene, Wang Tianlong completely burned his life essence. He transformed into a streak of light and shot off into the distance. At this point, he even tore apart the river of time. Unfortunately, his strength was only at the great emperor level. So how could they possibly escape from the emperor's grasp? He was then immediately captured and brought back by the emperor. The other two emperors of the Wang family were directly covered by the emperor's terrifying palm. Chapter 874 Wang Tianlong's Demise. Chu Fan understands the Wang family's plans, and the hand shows no sign of stopping. Instead, they headed directly in Wang Tianlong's direction. Soon, the huge hand grabbed Wang Tianlong completely. The terrifying force lifted Wang Tianlong's body up. No matter how much Wang Tianlong resisted, he couldn't withstand the power of that enormous hand. Wang Tianlong's strength appeared extremely weak and insignificant in front of the emperor. After doing all this, the emperor calmly grabbed Wang Tianlong's body and placed it next to Chu Fan. Wang Tianlong looked at the emperor with a terrified expression. There was still a hint of disbelief in his eyes. Impossible. Even a powerful expert at the level of a remnant immortal could not capture me so easily. Then, he looked on in bewilderment as the emperor spoke, because even the strongest remnant immortal in his memory could not have captured him so easily. Although the remnant immortal has come into contact with the realm of immortality, he is still at the level of a great emperor. Or rather, he is somewhere between the realm of a great emperor and the realm of immortality. Therefore, there is naturally a great gap between the remnant immortal and a true immortal. As a being at the level of a mortal immortal, the emperor's strength naturally far surpasses that of these beings at the level of remnant immortals. The emperor smiled contemptuously after hearing Wang Tianlong's words. After all, what is a little bit of blood loss in front of him, let alone the existence of Wang Tianlong, the sixth emperor? The dead should have the awareness of the dead. Then, the emperor spoke to Wang Tianlong, and after speaking, he gently touched Wang Tianlong's forehead with his finger. Then, Wang Tianlong turned into a beam of starlight and disappeared. No one could have imagined that a true sixth-generation emperor would disappear from the world so easily. However, Wang Tianlong's soul, or rather his memories, were all entered into the emperor's mind. After all, this time Chu Fan wanted the emperor to obtain all of Wang Tianlong's memories. Then, all of Wang Tianlong's memories flashed through the emperor's mind, and of course, those unimportant memories were directly deleted by the emperor. All that remains now are some of the more important things. Your Majesty, the Wang family of Wang Tianlong has a great grudge against our great Xia Empire. His Highness Wu Shuang has already started a war with the Wang family. Moreover, the Marshal Emperor obviously has no intention of getting involved in this matter, which is why he sent Wang Tianlong and his group to the ancient battlefield of the human race. After sorting through his memories, the Emperor slowly spoke to Chu Fan, a look of surprise on his face. Clearly, the Emperor had not expected that Wang Tianlong, whom they had encountered this time, would have such a deep grudge against their great Xia Empire. Under normal circumstances, they would not allow anyone with a great grudge against their great Xia Empire to live. After all, if these people continue to live, they may pose a threat to their great Xia Empire. They wouldn't let even an ant go so easily. It seems we've stumbled upon a lucky break this time. Chu Fan was somewhat surprised after hearing the Emperor's words, and then he slowly spoke to the Emperor in front of him. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the Emperor slowly recounted the other information from Wang Tianlong's memories. It turns out that the Wang family had already obtained the inheritance of the first human emperor, or rather, the Wang family had already known about this news. Of course, the news of the legacy left by the first human emperor remained very quiet throughout the entire ancient human path. Because throughout the entire void ancient road, everyone knows that the first human emperor left behind a legacy. However, no one has found the legacy left by the first human emperor. Wang Tianlong of the Wang family only discovered the location of the first human emperor's legacy during a battle with an unexpected alien demon. At that time, Wang Tianlong was only at the level of a fourth-generation great emperor. He was chased to this place by a demon, and later he discovered the inheritance site left by the first human emperor. This is why the Wang family has been searching for the human emperor's token. After the Wang family found a human emperor token, they also realized that a single human emperor token could not unlock the human emperor's inheritance. Or perhaps they know there is no human emperor, otherwise the human emperor's legacy left by the first human emperor cannot be opened, so players have been searching for cultivators who are knowledgeable about the human emperor's laws. However, the number of people who cultivate the human emperor's law is far too small. Therefore, even after searching for millions of years, the Wang family still couldn't find it. Later, the Wang family simply searched for the emperor's token. Because the first human emperor left behind a total of 4 tokens, they believed that collecting all 4 tokens might unlock the legacy left by the first human emperor. This is why the Wang family possesses 2 tokens. It's not just Wang Tianlong who has 1, but even the matriarch of the Wang family has 1. However, the token that the old matriarch of the Wang family possessed has already appeared in Chu Wushuang's hands. However, Chu Wushuang is currently unable to obtain the inheritance left by the first human emperor, because Chu Fan has already obtained the legacy left by the first human emperor. Therefore, Chu Wushuang naturally could not obtain the inheritance left by the first human emperor. After learning that Chu Fan possessed the human emperor's law, the Wang family also began to take notice of him. However, Chu Fan later disappeared inside the human race imperial pass. This led the Wang family to completely lose hope in Chu Fan. Then they saw Chu Wushuang, a prodigy who possessed the laws of the human emperor. Therefore, they wanted to capture Chu Wushuang and force him to obtain the human emperor's inheritance. It can be said that the Wang family's idea was perfect. If Chu Wushuang's backing isn't powerful enough, then the Wang family might actually have a chance to inherit the legendary legacy of the first human emperor. After learning all about it, Chu Fan smiled dismissively. If he hadn't received the inheritance from the first human emperor, he might have thought that the royal family's plan might have succeeded. But after he actually received the inheritance of the first human emperor, he felt that the royal family's plan could not succeed, because the legacy left by the first emperor is closely related to him. The Wang family, which did not cultivate the laws of the human emperor, naturally could not obtain or cultivate such a legacy, because the legacy left by the first human emperor can only be used by those who cultivate the human emperor's laws. Moreover, Chu Fan firmly believed that this first human emperor had his own trump card. He couldn't possibly watch his successor be killed by someone else. After all, the power of his physical body alone had already reached the level of a true immortal. Therefore, dealing with the sixth emperor is naturally very easy. Therefore, Wang Tianlong's plan, or rather the entire Wang family's plan, could not succeed. Chapter 875, Refining the Blood Essence of the First Human Emperor. The Wang family is completely annihilated. However, Chu Fan soon turned his gaze slowly toward the direction of the ancient human road. Clearly, he hadn't expected that his son would lead the powerful warriors of the Great Xia Empire to directly annihilate the entire Wang family. However, now that the Wang family has been destroyed, Chu Fan has no intention of continuing on the ancient road of the human race, because the ancient path of the human race did not offer Chu Fan much of an improvement. Moreover, Chu Fan also obtained information about the human powerhouses in Jinxian City from Wang Tianlong. There are indeed quite a few powerful human beings in Jinxian City. In Wang Tianlong's memory, there were several experts who had reached the level of a remnant immortal. The strongest among them was that Marshal Emperor who was at the level of a remnant immortal. He can be said to be the strongest person in the entire Jinxian City, although his strength is at the same level as that of a remnant immortal. However, Wang Tianlong knew that this person's strength far exceeded that of other powerful beings at the remnant immortal level. This is why Emperor Wu has always been the lord of Jinxian City. Or perhaps Jinxian City was originally Jinxian Palace, and this Emperor Wu was the city lord. The ancient road of humanity doesn't offer us much of an improvement. We might as well go back to the Time Tower and enhance our strength. Then, Chu Fan spoke directly to the emperor in front of him without any hesitation. After speaking, the two of them turned into 2 beams of light and disappeared. The two then appeared directly inside the Time Pagoda. Of course, if the two of them were to leave the Time Pagoda now, they would still be in the ancient battlefield of the human race. Upon arriving inside the Time Pagoda, Chu Fan sat down cross-legged on the top floor. As for the emperor, he has already gone to the Time Tower to cultivate. He had already reached the 2nd level of the mortal-immortal realm. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could quickly advance to the 3rd level of the mortal-immortal realm in the next period of time. Keep in mind that the true path to immortality is not far off. Therefore, he naturally hoped to improve his strength as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Chu Fan directly opened the drop of human emperor's essence blood in front of him. This drop of the emperor's essence blood could temporarily elevate his strength to the level of a mortal immortal. However, Chu Fan did not intend to use this drop of the first human emperor's essence blood in this way, because if Chu Fan were to absorb this drop of the first human emperor's essence blood now, so now he can quickly achieve nirvana. He could sense the terrifying power within that drop of the first emperor's blood essence. It's likely that it won't be long before he can use this drop of the first human emperor's essence blood to rapidly increase his strength and directly reach the level of the sixth human emperor. Although Chu Fan had just broken through to the level of a fourth-generation human emperor. However, because he entered the inheritance site of the first human emperor and received the first human emperor's inheritance, he has now progressed more than halfway to become the fourth human emperor. He is not far from achieving nirvana. Therefore, after absorbing this drop of the human emperor's essence blood, his strength may soon reach the level of a sixth-generation human emperor. Thinking of this, Chu Fan did not hesitate at all and immediately began to absorb the drop of essence blood, because their great Xia Empire has a considerable number of true immortal-level experts. Therefore, he naturally did not need this drop of essence blood to forcibly enhance his strength. Therefore, it would be better to use this drop of essence blood to slowly improve one's cultivation level. Chu Fan then placed the drop of blood essence directly in front of him. Then he directly activated the Devouring Heaven Demon Art. This technique can devour all things in heaven and earth. Therefore, it was also very fast to devour the essence and blood of the human emperor. After the power of the human emperor's essence blood was absorbed into Chu Fan's body, Chu Fan's strength also began to gradually improve. Then a golden light appeared around him. The golden light completely enveloped Chu Fan. Then he began to undergo a rebirth. Of course, his current nirvana does not mean that he has reached the level of the fifth emperor, because he planned to undergo nirvana ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, Chu Fan was constantly cultivating inside the Time Pagoda. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuang on the ancient emperor city side had also dealt with the Wang family of the ancient emperor city. After all, apart from Wang Changsheng, who had forcibly entered the level of a three-generation emperor, the Wang family had already been dealt with by them long ago. The current third emperor was completely destroyed by the Void Emperor. Therefore, the entire Wang family has now completely perished in the long river of history. Even their ancestor, Wang Tianlong, had already perished at the hands of the emperor. So the Wang family can be said to have completely disappeared into the annals of history. After doing all this, Chu Wuxuang glanced leisurely at the city lord of the ancient imperial city. After all, if it weren't for the city lord of this ancient imperial city, so how could Chu Wuxuang possibly lead this army directly here to annihilate the entire Wang family? After doing all this, Chu Wuxuang nodded to Chen Jibao and the others beside him. General Chen Jibao, please return to the Great Xia Empire now. Then, Chu Wuxuang's voice slowly echoed throughout the entire ancient imperial city, and his eyes looked at Chen Jibao in front of him with a peaceful expression. Your humble servant obeys. After hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, Chen Jibao nodded directly to Chu Wuxuang. Then he led the great snow dragon rider behind him directly toward the direction of the ancient human road. He was accompanied by several powerful figures at the level of emperors from the Great Xia Empire. The Void Emperor and the Eternal Universe Emperor also cupped their hands in greeting to Chu Wuxuang. Then the two of them transformed into two beams of light and disappeared. As for the Gun Emperor hiding in the shadows, he did not hesitate at all and chose to go to the Great Xia Empire. Now that there is no danger here, so naturally, they didn't intend to stay there any longer. After all, they also wanted to return to the Time Tower of the Great Xia Empire to cultivate quickly. Only by rapidly improving their strength can they cope with what is to come. Thus, the army of the Great Xia Empire quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. Meanwhile, the army of the Xianyuan family slowly bowed in Chu Wuxuang's direction. Then they headed towards the ancient road of the human race. After all, they are now planning to leave the ancient human path. Or rather, the ancient path of the human race no longer poses a threat to Chu Wuxuang. So there's not much point in them staying here. It seems to have no effect other than intimidating the enemy. But now, who in the entire ancient human race dares to be an enemy of their peerless prince? Chu Wuxuang then slowly turned her gaze to the city lord of the ancient imperial city. Then he slowly began to speak. How long will it take to repair the ancient road of the human race? After asking the question, there was not a trace of respect in his eyes. After all, how could a mere second-generation emperor possibly command his respect? Chapter 876, the city lord of the ancient imperial city's regret, and the prodigy's curiosity about the Great Xia Empire. After Chu Wuxuang finished speaking, everyone present turned their attention to the city lord of the ancient imperial city, because they now have no way to access the ancient human path. After all, the ancient human path had been completely destroyed by the Great Xia Empire. The only way to continue exploring the ancient path of the human race is to wait for it to be repaired. The city lord of the ancient imperial city curled his lip after hearing Chu Wuxuang's words. If it weren't for this guy in front of me, how could the ancient road of the human race have been destroyed? Now he actually wants to quickly repair the ancient human path. This moment made him feel helpless. However, he dared not refute Chu Wuxuang at this moment. After all, this ruthless person had directly destroyed the entire Wang family, and more importantly, a powerful person who forcibly entered the three-generation emperor realm had also appeared in the Wang family. Even so, this powerful figure, who was at the level of a three-generation emperor, perished completely in this great battle, which shows how intense the battle was. More importantly, even the martial emperor in their human race's imperial pass issued the final order not to interfere in this matter, which shows just how powerful this outside force is. So now he could only helplessly look in the direction of the ancient human path. After thinking for a moment, he replied seriously, "Given the current situation, the ancient road of the human race will take at least half a month to repair, and we will also need to invite a powerful expert to repair it. If I were to repair it by myself, it would take at least a year." After he finished speaking, he looked at Chu Wuxuang with a hint of expectation. After all, the powerful figure that the city lord of this ancient imperial city wants to invite is a powerful figure from the Great Xia Empire. After hearing the words of the city lord of the ancient imperial city, Chu Wuxuang glanced at him calmly, and then led Chu Yanran and the others away from the ancient imperial city. He didn't care how long it would take the city lord of this ancient imperial city to repair the ancient road of the human race. In any case, the ancient human road must be fully restored when he returns. Moreover, he never intended for the true top experts of the Great Xia Empire to help this city lord of the ancient imperial city. After Chu Wuxuang led Chu Yanran and her group away from this place, everyone's eyes held a hint of emotion. The city lord of the ancient imperial city shook his head with a helpless expression. At this moment, he naturally understood what Chu Wuxuang meant. So he leisurely turned his gaze toward the direction of the ancient human road. There was also a hint of heartache in her eyes. After all, repairing the ancient human path consumed a lot of his resources. It could even be said that all the treasures he accumulated over those millions of years might have been used up. Moreover, it would require inviting a truly top-tier expert to repair it. Otherwise, if he were to repair it by himself, it would take at least a year. At this moment, the Su family and the Qin family looked at the city lord of the ancient imperial city with a calm expression. Although the Su family and the Qin family are not as powerful as the Wang family, however, their strength is no less than that of the city lord's mansion. So now they looked in the direction Chu Wuxuang left and sighed. Then they each led their own strongest members away from this place. After all, they needed to inform the family not to provoke this troublesome outsider. Otherwise, they might be the ones to be wiped out next. Then, the powerful members of the Su and Qin families left the place. Then they each returned to their own families. Upon seeing this scene, the city lord of the ancient imperial city naturally displayed a hint of anger on his face, because he knew that the Su family and the Qin family had no intention of helping him. At first, he wanted the Su and Qin families to help him. This way, the ancient road of the human race can be repaired more quickly. But to everyone's surprise, the Su and Qin families left so easily. This shows that the Su family and the Qin family do not intend to get involved in this matter. As for the other cultivators, they were also gazing into the distance with a look of shock. It was as if all of this had nothing to do with them. Upon seeing this, the city lord of the ancient emperor city snorted coldly, and then led the powerful figures of the ancient emperor city directly into the city lord's mansion. Now he needs to go back and discuss how to improve the ancient road for humans. After the city lord of the ancient imperial city left, the people present then realized what was happening. After all, everything that happened at the beginning shocked them. I never expected that the Wang family would actually be wiped out. Moreover, among the experts that Chu Wuxuang brought this time, there was actually a 3-life emperor-level expert. This 3-life emperor-level expert directly killed an expert who forcibly entered the 3-life emperor level. This battle was truly terrifying. At this moment, a prodigy looked at Chu Wuxuang and the others departing figures with a look of shock in his eyes and said something along with a touch of emotion. Clearly, he hadn't expected this battle to end this way. Didn't you notice? There's another top expert beside Chu Wuxuang who hasn't made a move yet. I imagine his strength is no weaker than this 3-emperor-level expert who has already made a move. Yes, I also noticed that there was a middle-aged man standing next to him who did not make a move, and this middle-aged man was always in the same position as the 3rd emperor who made the move. It seems that the Great Xia Empire outside is very powerful. Just this time, there are 2 powerhouses at the level of 3 emperors who have accompanied them. I wonder which world they are in. It's not just that the Great Xia Empire is powerful. The Heavenly God Academy that appeared later is probably also very powerful. Otherwise, how could they have left unscathed after challenging the prince of the Great Xia Empire? That's right, but the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire should be hostile to each other. At this moment, the other prodigies who had come to their senses also began to discuss, as they were all very curious about the Great Xia Empire and Prince Chu Wushuang. Moreover, what they're even more curious about now is just how powerful Chu Wushuang's Great Xia Empire really is. At the same time, they were also curious about just how powerful the Heavenly God Academy, which had just come to challenge Chu Wushuang, was, in addition to the Great Xia Empire where Chu Wushuang was located. After all, the forces that could challenge Chu Wushuang, the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, and leave unscathed could not be simple. Moreover, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy is by no means weak. With his strength, he not only reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. Moreover, he defeated a top genius in the late stage of the Great Sage realm, although he was later defeated by Baihu, one of Chu Wushuang's followers. But it cannot be denied that his strength is in no way inferior. Many of the geniuses present were far weaker than him, because many of the geniuses who entered the ancient path of the human race did not break through to the Great Saint realm. Chapter 877, The Turbulent History of the Ancient Human Path, The Rise of Human Prodigies. After this incident, the reputation of the Great Xia Empire spread throughout the entire human race. Both the top experts in these imperial passes and the human race in other worlds received news about the Great Xia Empire, although news of the Great Xia Empire did not clearly spread throughout the world. However, the fact that the Great Xia Empire dispatched 10 emperor-level powerhouses this time, not including Chun Jibao and Lu Bu, and 2 other emperor-level powerhouses who had already reached the 3rd generation of emperors, instantly caused the entire human race to explode. No one expected that the Great Xia Empire in this world would be so terrifying. It's important to know that empires also exist in other worlds. However, none of the empires in those worlds were as powerful as the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, all humankind is extremely curious about the world where the Great Xia Empire is located. They also wanted to see what kind of world could give rise to such a terrifying force. After all, the strength of the Great Xia Empire had far exceeded everyone's imagination. For the next period of time, the entire human race imperial pass was filled with discussions about the Great Xia Empire. Of course, the city lord's mansion in the ancient imperial city was in a great hurry during this period, because they have been repairing the ancient human path all this time. After all, the ancient road of the human race was something very important to them, because the ancient roads of the human race are ultimately connected to the ancient roads of other demon races or other races. If the prodigies of the human race do not reach the final ancient road, then they are sinners against the human race. Therefore, the city lord of the ancient imperial city was very serious during the following period. He even invited a powerful figure who had been a 4th-generation emperor from Jinshin City. Then, it took millions of years of accumulation from the ancient imperial city to repair the ancient road of the human race. This repair also took several months. However, a few months is not a long time for these geniuses, because often they go into seclusion for several years or even decades. After the ancient road of the human race was repaired, the pride of humanity once again embarked on the ancient path of humanity. This time, the prodigies in the imperial pass were no longer as arrogant as they had been at the beginning. After all, the entire Wang family ended up like them. If they continued to be arrogant, it could bring utter destruction to the forces behind them. Now, all the geniuses in the imperial pass, or even those from outside, believe that the downfall of the Wang family is related to the Wang family's kingly way. After all, that's what was said in the past. Meanwhile, Chu Wushuang led Chu Yanran and the others to continue their journey through the challenges. Chu Wushuang and the others were already extremely powerful. Therefore, they were naturally very fast in clearing the levels. Chu Wushuang, with his cultivation reaching the quasi-emperor level, quickly passed through all the checkpoints. In less than a year, he directly reached the checkpoint corresponding to the ancient imperial city. At this point, no one underestimated the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, because Chu Wushuang's speed in clearing the levels far exceeded everyone's expectations. Moreover, Chu Wushuang, who had barged in, showed no intention of stopping. Instead, it continued to rush upwards. However, as Chu Wushuang ascended higher and higher, the difficulty of the levels increases progressively. 10 years have passed quickly. During these 10 years, the entire ancient road of the human race was very lively. Meanwhile, during this period, Chu Wushuang's name resounded throughout the entire human race. Both the prodigies of the past and the prodigies of later generations held Chu Wushuang in the highest esteem. Chu Wushuang has now successfully reached the 84th level of the ancient human path. After the 60th level of the ancient road of humanity, each level is occupied by a quasi-emperor level being. Now Chu Wushuang is facing 10 late-stage quasi-emperors. His own cultivation level had reached the mid-stage of quasi-emperor. In the past 10 years, he has also successfully broken through a small level. And today, the aura emanating from him is even more terrifying. Then, Chu Wuxuang swiftly killed all the puppets in front of him with a single sword strike. This completely brought peace to the area where he was located. Having done all this, Chu Wuxuang had no intention of continuing to the next level, because he knew that with his current strength as a mid-stage quasi-emperor, he still couldn't completely open up the ancient path of the human race. Moreover, after opening up the ancient path of the human race, he will face the geniuses of all the heavens and myriad worlds. Therefore, Chu Wuxuang now plans to raise his strength to the late quasi-emperor stage or the perfect quasi-emperor stage. If possible, he even wanted to raise his cultivation to the human emperor realm. In this way, he would also be able to deal with the geniuses of all the heavens and myriad realms. Chu Wuxuang then went into seclusion at this stage. He is now not far from breaking through to the late stage of quasi-emperor. Moreover, the ancient road of the human race was originally prepared for these geniuses. Therefore, the cultivation speed on the ancient human path far exceeds that of other places. This is also why Chu Wuxuang chose to cultivate in the ancient road of the human race instead of in the time tower of the Great Xia Empire. Just as Chu Wuxuang chose to go into seclusion to break through his own strength. Below Chu Wuxuang were Chu Yanran and Chu Chun. The two of them were currently not far from Chu Wuxuang. Moreover, Chu Yanran directly broke through to the early stage of quasi-emperor. Chu Chun also reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. Like Chu Chun, Xianyuan Pokinglong and Xuanwu also reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. During these 10 years, they all reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. As for Baihu, he directly broke through to the early stage of quasi-emperor. They are among the top beings in the entire ancient human race. Of course, the geniuses who emerged among the human race during this period were not limited to those from the Great Xia Empire. For example, the War God and others have already entered the ancient path of the human race. The War God's strength also broke through to the Great Saint realm. It can be said that he is quite a good candidate among all the prodigies. Qinzhan also rose to prominence directly. His strength was originally at the late stage of the Great Sage realm. During these 10 years, he successfully broke through to the Great Sage Perfection realm. Meanwhile, Xianyuan Pa and Qinzhan also fought a great battle in the ancient imperial city. This great battle also laid the foundation for Qin's military strength, because in this battle, Xianyuan Pa did not defeat Qinzhan. The final battle ended in a draw. Therefore, the prodigies of the human race also acknowledged Qinzhan's strength. Besides Qinzhan, there is also Su Qing'er. She is the pride of the Su family, although their strength is not comparable to that of Xianyuan Pa and Qinzhan. However, they also gained their inheritance while trapped in an unknown space-time within the ancient human path. Therefore, he successfully ascended the ancient path of the human race with a cultivation level of a late-stage great sage. She then became the first human female prodigy after Chu Yanran. Of course, even at the late stage of the great sage realm, she was still behind Chu Yanran. Chapter 878, The Double-Pupiled One Entering the Ancient Path of the Human Race, the Battle Maniac Luo Tianxin. Of course, this excludes those exceptional talents. Many exceptional talents from the outside world have also come to the ancient road of the human race. For example, several of the holy sons of the Heavenly God Academy also came to the ancient road of the human race. Zhao Wuji successfully broke through to the quasi-emperor realm during this trial. However, it seems that Zhao Wuji has been confronted by the White Tiger. The two engage in a fierce battle every time they attempt a level. Then Zhao Wuji was thoroughly humiliated by the White Tiger. The White Tiger was originally a mythical beast. Moreover, with Chu Wuxuang's blessing, the White Tiger's strength was greatly enhanced. Therefore, in the same realm, Baihu easily defeated Zhao Wuji. Therefore, the great battle between Baihu and Zhao Wuji over the years has attracted the attention of the geniuses on the entire human battlefield. After all, the two of them have reached the same level of strength. The final battle was when the two broke through to the quasi-emperor realm. Unfortunately, Zhao Wuji was still defeated by Baihu in this battle. After that, Zhao Wuji never challenged Baihu again. It was as if they had completely resigned themselves to their fate. However, another holy son of the Heavenly God Academy was eager to challenge the prodigies of the Great Xia Empire. This holy son of the Heavenly God Academy has also reached the Great Saint Perfection realm. So he fought a great battle with Xuanwu. Of course, his ultimate fate was to be defeated by Xuanwu. It could even be said that if Zhao Wuji had intervened, then this holy son of the Heavenly God Academy also perished at the hands of Xuanwu. Therefore, the Heavenly God Academy became nothing more than a foil to the Great Xia Empire. However, the strength of the geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy also made the human geniuses from all the heavens and myriad realms fully understand the strength of the geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy, although they were all defeated by the geniuses of the Great Xia Empire. However, the prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy are extremely powerful. Apart from Zhao Wuji, who had already reached the early stage of Quasi-Emperor, the number of great sage-level geniuses in the Heavenly God Academy has reached 6, 2 of whom have already reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. As for the rest, they have all reached the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm. It is a unique existence among all the ancient paths of the human race. They are among the very best. However, in any case, their strength was inferior to that of the Great Xia Empire, because the Great Xia Empire possesses truly top-tier experts. While the prodigies of the human race continued to venture into the ancient path of humanity, another 10 years passed. Even after another 10 years, no one had successfully traversed the ancient path of humanity. After all, each time the ancient human path was opened, it would take at least 100 years before anyone could traverse it. Even Chu Wushuang is still far from truly clearing the game. Moreover, Chu Wushuang did not continue to advance after she went into seclusion to cultivate. No one knows Chu Wushuang's current situation, because Chu Wushuang disappeared from everyone's sight after going into seclusion. However, Chu Yanran's speed was by no means weak. He has now surpassed Chu Wushuang and reached the 3 levels above Chu Wushuang. They're only 3 levels away from reaching level 90. This is the fastest record for clearing the ancient road since it was opened. As for the other prodigies, there is still a certain distance between them and Chu Yanran. However, the distance between them and Chu Wushuang was slowly closing. However, many people do not believe that they can surpass Chu Wushuang, because they all understood just how terrifying Chu Wushuang's talent was. After all, he was the first among the human race's prodigies to break through to the Quasi-Emperor realm. Moreover, he was someone who had already broken through to the Quasi-Emperor realm without even stepping onto the ancient path of the human race. Therefore, many prodigies are now speculating whether Chu Wushuang chose to break through to the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm before emerging from seclusion. Of course, all of these geniuses' guesses were correct. Chu Wushuang's plan was to break through to the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm before emerging from seclusion. In that case, he could directly pass through the ancient path of the human race. At the same time that Chu Wushuang was in seclusion. At this time, a young man also arrived at the ancient road of the human race. This young man has an exceptionally beautiful face. His eyes held a gentle gaze as he looked at the ancient human path. He was also wearing a long, silver-white robe. He looked like a true immortal, accompanied by a middle-aged man holding a long spear. The middle-aged man had no aura whatsoever. However, everyone present took a step back after sensing the aura emanating from the middle-aged man. This shows just how terrifying the middle-aged man's strength really is. Uncle Seacombe, what stage have my elder brother and elder sister reached now? The young man looked at the middle-aged man beside him and asked casually, a hint of curiosity flashing in his eyes after he finished speaking. Of course, most importantly, his eyes carried a terrifying aura of destruction. If a top expert were here, they would definitely recognize that this young man's eyes are the legendary double pupils. Moreover, the double pupils now appear to have merged into one. Clearly, he had cultivated his double pupils to an absolutely top-tier level. His Highness Wushuang has now reached the 84th level, while Princess Yanran has reached the 87th level. Upon hearing the young man's words, the middle-aged man smiled slowly and then glanced at the ancient human road in front of him. I never expected that my elder brother would be surpassed by my elder sister. It seems that I must also surpass my elder brother as quickly as possible, so that he will not dare to underestimate me. Upon hearing the middle-aged man's words, the young man's eyes flashed with interest, and he looked at the ancient human road in front of him with eager anticipation. Just as the young man finished speaking, at this moment, a young man dressed in a purple robe slowly walked towards him, and the young man exuded a faint fighting aura. Clearly, this young man is practicing the law of combat. I am Luo Tianxian. I have met this friend before. May I ask where you come from and whether you would be willing to fight me? The young man, Luo Tianxian, looked at the young man in front of him with great longing and spoke. The young man in front of him was also surprised after hearing Luo Tianxian's words, and then he slowly waved the folding fan in his hand. Then he calmly looked at Luo Tianxian in purple robes in front of him. Why does this gentleman challenge me right from the start? I don't think we have any grudges between us. At this moment, the young man slowly spoke to Luo Tianxian, and a glint flashed in his eyes after he finished speaking. I sense that your aura is not weak. Among everyone present, only you can put pressure on me, so I would like to test your strength. After hearing the young man's words, Luo Tianxian looked at him very seriously and spoke. After he finished speaking, a terrifying fighting spirit emanated from his entire body. Chapter 879, Chu Wendao and Sikong Changfeng on the ancient road of the human race. The changes of little demon king Chu Wendao. Upon hearing Luo Tianxin's words, the surrounding prodigies all turned their gazes toward the young man. At the same time, a hint of curiosity flashed in their eyes, because many of the geniuses present knew Luo Tianxin. After all, this guy is a complete fighting maniac. Having only recently arrived at the ancient road of humanity, he has already defeated many of humanity's most talented individuals. One of them had even reached the early stage of the Great Sage Realm. Even the most outstanding human prodigies in the early stages of the Great Sage Realm were easily defeated by Luo Tianxin. I didn't expect this fighting maniac to have his eye on another prodigy. I just don't know if this prodigy can defeat him. The only ones who could defeat the battle maniac are the top experts and geniuses of our human race's ancient path. However, those top experts and geniuses of our human race's ancient path have already reached levels that we don't know, so they naturally cannot fight the battle maniac. Yes, after all, the battle maniac easily defeated even a great sage in the early stage. Apart from Chu Wushuang and a few other top geniuses, it seems that no one can defeat him. Unfortunately, Chu Wushuang and the others are no longer here. Only the fighting madman can fight them once he reaches the level where Chu Wushuang and the others are. At this moment, the group of geniuses present also began to discuss among themselves, while their eyes also held a hint of regret as they looked at the young man in front of them. After all, Luo Tianxin had already defeated many prodigies. In their hearts, apart from Chu Wushuang and a few other top geniuses, defeating Luo Tianxin, a prodigy who has just arrived at the ancient road of humanity, is not as simple as he imagined. Just as everyone was discussing Luo Tianxin, the fighting maniac, a prodigy couldn't help but point at the young man and exclaim in disbelief. I don't think this person is as simple as we imagine. Haven't you noticed that he looks a lot like someone else? After hearing what this prodigy said, everyone turned their attention to the young man. At the same time, their eyes were full of scrutiny. Yes, I also noticed that he looks a lot like someone, a lot like that person. At this moment, a human prodigy who had already entered the ancient path of the human race couldn't help but speak up. After speaking, he looked at the young man with disbelief in his eyes. Even if he isn't that one, he must have a very close relationship with that one. At this moment, another veteran prodigy slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes filled with determination. At the same time, a hint of admiration flashed in his eyes. Upon hearing the words of these veteran prodigies, the other prodigies also turned their gazes toward the young man. Clearly, they were all trying to uncover the young man's true identity. Luo Tianxin and the young man in front of him naturally heard the discussion among the geniuses around them. However, neither of them showed much expression on their faces. Instead, the young man slowly cupped his hands in a gesture of respect towards Luo Tianxin. Brother Luo's strength is not bad either, but if Brother Luo wants to fight me, then he must first know my identity. I am Chu Wendao. Then, the young man slowly spoke to Luo Tianxin in front of him, his eyes still showing a calm expression. However, a hint of fighting spirit could be seen flashing in his double pupils, because he could now sense that Luo Tianxin in front of him was quite powerful. Upon hearing Chu Wendao's name, the prodigies present immediately thought of that person. After all, his appearance is very similar to that of the person in question. Now that they've heard his name, they're pretty much certain. Chu Wendao, what a fine name. I wonder what your relationship is with Chu Wushuang from the ancient human path. Luo Tianxin, having learned the purpose of the discussion among these prodigies, looked curiously at Chu Wendao and asked. There was a hint of confirmation in his eyes. After hearing Luo Tianxin's words, the other prodigies also looked at Chu Wendao with serious expressions. Chu Wushuang is my elder brother, and I am Chu Wendao, the second prince of the Great Xia Empire. After hearing Luo Tianxin's words, Chu Wendao looked at Luo Tianxin very seriously and spoke. After he finished speaking, his aura instantly burst forth. As the second prince of the Great Xia Empire, he naturally possessed his own pride. However, the aura emanating from Chu Wendao was not that of the Golden Human Emperor law, because Chu Wendao cultivates the laws of destruction and the laws of life. Although Chu Fan, Chu Wushuang, and the others all wanted him to cultivate the Human Emperor's law, but this guy doesn't want to cultivate the Human Emperor's law. Ultimately, he cultivated the destruction law and the life law of double pupils. At the same time, he was often taken by Zhao Gao Luo Wang to read. Chu Wendao still possesses a righteous aura, and he has cultivated the law of righteousness to a level no weaker than the law of destruction. At this moment, Sikong Changfeng was standing next to Chu Wendao. Because of the lesson learned from Chu Wushuang's arrival at the ancient human path, Zhao Gao Luo Wang and the others this time assigned Sikong Changfeng to accompany Chu Wendao. It should be noted that Sikong Changfeng has now reached the level of a second emperor. It is even possible to fight against a powerful figure like a three-generation emperor. Upon hearing Chu Wendao's words, everyone present looked at him with great curiosity. Those who had never seen Chu Wushuang before looked at Chu Wendao with great curiosity. However, those who had witnessed Chu Wushuang's true strength looked at Chu Wendao with a hint of admiration. Because the people of the Great Xia Empire are all extremely perverted. The man in front of me, known as the second prince of the Great Xia Empire, is definitely not as simple as I imagined. Luo Tianxin's eyes gleamed with even stronger fighting spirit. He originally wanted a real battle with Chu Wushuang. However, he also knew that there was a certain gap between himself and Chu Wushuang. So when he realized that the person in front of him was Chu Wushuang's younger brother, he became even more interested. So Brother Chu is that person's younger brother. In that case, I would like to have a serious battle with Brother Chu. At this moment, Luo Tianxin cupped his hands and said, and after he finished speaking, the aura of a late-stage great sage burst forth from his body. Chu Wendao smiled when he saw this. Then he waved to Luo Tianxin in front of him. The next second, an aura belonging to the late stage of the great sage also rose from his body. His aura of righteousness erupted instantly. If the aura of the human emperor emanating from Chu Wushuang was extremely domineering, the aura of righteousness emanating from Chu Wendao was quite gentle. This made him look like a refined scholar. Even Chu Wushuang, who was here, probably wouldn't have imagined that his little devil king would now resemble a refined scholar. It can be said that Chu Wendao has changed a lot since he was a child. Of course, all of this is inseparable from the teachings of Zhuge Liang and others. After all, they didn't want their second prince to become a little devil, although they all doted on their second prince. However, even if their own second prince becomes a little devil, they will absolutely not ignore it. On the contrary, they will hire him to the very end. Chapter 880 Battle Maniac Luo Tianxin versus former Little Demon King Chu Wendao. At this moment, after hearing Chu Wen's words, the others finally understood the true identity of the refined young man standing in front of them. Therefore, they were very curious about just how strong Chu Wendao had become. After all, the strongest genius in the entire ancient human race path right now is Chu Wushuang, and it can be said that he deserves the name Wushuang. And now everyone is very curious about this second prince of the Great Xia Empire, who is known as the Seeker. They also wanted to see if the strength of this second prince of the Great Xia Empire could be compared to that of Chu Wushuang. I never expected that he would actually have such a big connection with Chu Wushuang. However, as a prince of the Great Xia Empire, he actually cultivates the law of destruction and the law of life. At this moment, the genius at the Saint King level also looked at Chu Wendao with a hint of curiosity and spoke. After he finished speaking, the look of curiosity in his eyes was still very strong. Yes, Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire both cultivate the human emperor law, but I didn't expect that the second prince of the Great Xia Empire cultivates the law of destruction and the law of life. Haven't you noticed that there's a big problem with his eyes? His eyes seem to be the legendary double pupils. If he really has the legendary double pupils, then it is only natural that he cultivates the laws of destruction and the laws of life. I never expected that the second prince of the Great Xia Empire would possess the legendary double pupils. At this moment, everyone present was discussing the laws that Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire cultivated. They were naturally very clear about them, because the most powerful law cultivated by Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran is naturally the human emperor law. Although many prodigies did not understand the power of the human emperor's law at first, after truly witnessing Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran, they completely understood just how powerful the human emperor's law really was. Therefore, after sensing that Chu Wendao did not possess the human emperor's law, they became even more puzzled. However, after sensing the laws of destruction and life on Chu Wendao's body, they had their own guesses. Moreover, some geniuses have already guessed that Chu Wendao possesses the legendary double pupils. You should know that these are double pupils, which are the kind of pupils that can be used by a powerful person who is born with the ability to prove the Dao Emperor level. Therefore, they can now understand why Chu Wendao cultivates the law of destruction and the law of life. While many prodigies were looking at Chu Wendao and Luo Tianxin with curious eyes, at this moment, Luo Tianxin also slowly took a step towards Chu Wendao's direction. Then, a look of excitement instantly appeared in his eyes. The next second, Luo Tianxin was seen flying into the sky. The terrifying aura emanating from his body erupted completely. The law he cultivates is the law of combat. Therefore, the moment his battle law was released, the entire world seemed to be completely shocked. At the same time, a silver-white spear quickly appeared in his hand. He stood between heaven and earth like a true god of war. Then, Luo Tianxun slowly turned his gaze to Chu Wendao. At the same time, his voice drifted gently from the sky. Let's fight. Chu Wendao smiled calmly upon seeing this, and then slowly walked step by step into the sky. The aura emanating from him, also belonging to the late stage of the Great Sage realm, erupted without hesitation. At the same time, a silver-white spear appeared in his hand. However, he was not wearing a silver-white battle armor, although the Great Xia Empire has techniques that can condense armor. However, Chu Wendao did not practice this technique. It can be said that the path he took was very different from that of Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran. Chu Wendao slowly came to a stop in the sky. His incredibly powerful aura also erupted completely. At the same time, a dazzling golden light slowly appeared around him. However, this golden light was not as domineering as the human emperor's law. On the contrary, it appears quite gentle. This is the righteous law that Chu Wendao cultivates. Moreover, the power of the law of righteousness that he is currently cultivating is in no way weaker than the law of destruction. You are very different from the legendary Chu Wushuang. I have heard that Chu Wushuang has an extremely domineering aura, while you give me a very gentle and righteous aura. At this moment, Luo Tianxun slowly looked at Chu Wendao in front of him and spoke, with a hint of curiosity on his face. Clearly, he hadn't expected that the younger brother of this peerless prince would possess the legendary righteous spirit. Although the law of righteousness is not as difficult to cultivate as the law of the human emperor. However, the cultivation method of the law of righteousness far surpasses that of other laws. My elder brother cultivates the human emperor law, so he naturally carries an aura of dominance, while I cultivate the righteous law, so I naturally do not have the domineering aura of my elder brother. Chu Wendao then slowly looked at Luo Tianxun in front of him and spoke, his eyes still calm after he finished speaking. Luo Tianxun nodded after hearing Chu Wendao's words. Without the slightest hesitation, he thrust his spear directly towards Chu Wendao's direction. The terrifying power caused the entire surrounding space to tremble, and this seemingly ordinary shot appeared right in front of Chu Wendao. Upon seeing this, Chu Wendao calmly used the spear in his hand to defend himself. He then swiftly used his spear to block Luo Tianxun's attack. The moment the two spears collided, a violent tremor shook the entire sky. At the same time, the void around the two of them shattered completely. It was as if even the surrounding void could not withstand their attacks. Then, two golden figures in the sky were seen colliding repeatedly. Perhaps it could be described as two golden beams of light continuously streaking across the sky. After all, the laws of battle are inherently golden in color. Chu Wendao's aura of righteous law was also golden. However, this golden color is not particularly pure compared to the human emperor's law. The two exchanged hundreds of blows in a short period of time. It could even be said that the battle between the two had already fully begun in the blink of an eye before anyone had a chance to see clearly. Meanwhile, Sikong Changfeng stood aside, intently watching the great battle in the sky. Although he has now reached the level of a second emperor, it will take him some time to break through to the level of a third emperor. This is why he was chosen to protect Chu Wendao this time. However, it also allowed Sikong Changfeng to hone his strength within the human race's imperial pass. Chapter 881 God King Dharma confronts double pupil Dharma form. A terrifying battle of prodigies. Of course, it's not about having Sikong Changfeng fight against a powerful human emperor-level expert from the ancient human path. However, the Great Xia Empire at this time already understood the rules of the Void Ancient Road. Therefore, they all knew that their two princes would enter the true ancient road of 100 clans. At that time, it is possible that the great emperor of the demon clan or the great emperor of other races will take action. In this way, Sikong Changfeng would have the opportunity to gain experience. Therefore, Sikong Changfeng also felt a sense of anticipation at this moment. Meanwhile, the battle between Luo Tianxun and Chu Wendao on the other side was becoming increasingly fierce. After colliding with each other once, the two were once again upside down in the sky they each occupied. At this moment, Luo Tianxun's fighting spirit became even more terrifying. He was like a fighting maniac. He truly deserves his reputation as a fighting maniac. The spear in his hand was now radiating a terrifying aura of combat principles. Chu Wendao, standing before him, calmly gripped the spear in his hand. Although Chu Wendao cultivates the law of righteousness, however, the aura of the law of destruction emanating from him is now slowly merging into the law of righteousness. As a result, the aura emanating from the person became extremely terrifying. After all, this is a fusion of two top-tier laws. Luo Tianxun was overjoyed to see this. If he wanted to have a major battle, he would naturally want to fight against a true top genius. Chu Wendao is now a true top genius. Therefore, he was naturally overjoyed to engage in a fierce battle with Chu Wendao. Then Luo Tianqian leaped high into the air. The spear in his hand instantly transformed into a terrifying behemoth. This giant beast has 3 heads. At the same time, the entire body seemed to instantly traverse the entire river of time. A terrifying aura swept directly towards Chu Wendao's direction. Upon seeing this, Chu Wendao did not hesitate at all and thrust his spear directly into the sky. The next second, a terrifying light appeared behind him. At the same time, a golden dragon instantly materialized behind Chu Wendao. More importantly, this golden dragon also carried the aura of terrifying, righteous laws. Then, the golden dragon charged straight at the giant beast in the sky. The next second, the 2 terrifying forces collided in the sky. The moment these 2 terrifying forces collided in the sky, the entire sky seemed to have been completely torn apart. A terrifying sound suddenly came from the sky. The next second, that terrifying aura swept across the entire ancient road of the human race. Of course, this only applies to the floor they are on. This terrifying power instantly shocked all the geniuses around them. At the same time, many outstanding talents are also constantly regressing, because at this moment, they were unable to withstand the fluctuations brought about by these 2 terrifying forces. As for Chu Wendao and Luo Tianqian in the sky, they stood calmly in the sky. Neither of them showed any signs of distress. It was as if the battle that had just taken place wasn't between the 2 of them, but between other people. At this moment, Luo Tianqian's eyes were already brimming with excitement. As expected of the second prince of the great Xia Empire, your strength is indeed terrifying. However, I will now unleash my most powerful abilities. I hope you can withstand it. After Luo Tianqian finished speaking, an even stronger aura of battle laws emanated from his body, and more importantly, he also exuded an ancient aura. The next second, the originally orange-yellow aura of the battle law slowly turned silver-white, and the silver-white light directly enveloped his entire body. Then a huge image of a God King appeared behind him. The terrifying power instantly caused the entire space to seem to collapse. God King body, I didn't expect this guy to have a God King body. But even if you have a God King body, so what? You will still be defeated in front of me. At this moment, Chu Wendao naturally noticed the physique that Luo Tianqian possessed. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes, but soon he also released the destructive law on his body. The black law of destruction instantly annihilated the golden aura of righteousness emanating from him. At the same time, his double pupils were fully open. The next second, a pair of enormous double pupils appeared behind him. Those enormous double pupils seemed capable of completely piercing through the heavens and earth. Chu Wendao's Dharma form is very different from others' Dharma forms. His first Dharma form was a pair of enormous double pupils. This is the Dharma form he is currently displaying. 2 terrifying auras emanated from the double pupils behind Chu Wendao. These 2 auras of destruction transformed directly into 2 pillars of light. Then, without any surprise, they charged towards Luo Tianqian's direction. Meanwhile, the Divine King's image behind Luo Tianqian was also emanating a very strong fighting aura. At the same time, his enormous hand also reached out. Then, the giant hand of the God King's Dharma image collided with the 2 destructive auras of the double pupil Dharma image. The moment these 2 terrifying auras collided, the surrounding void was torn apart once again. At the same time, 2 terrifying forces poured down from the sky. This caused the geniuses below to retreat again and again. Even the geniuses below were looking at the sky with disbelief and shock in their eyes. This was the first truly epic battle they had ever witnessed between top-tier geniuses. At the beginning of the battles between Luo Tianqian and the other geniuses, he never used the Divine King Dharma form. Of course, the main reason is that the strength of the other geniuses is not as terrifying as Chu Wendao's. Therefore, they naturally could not get Luo Tianqian to use the Divine King Dharma form. However, if Luo Tianqian doesn't use his Divine King Dharma form when facing Chu Wendao, he has no chance of victory. Unfortunately, the power emanating from his terrifying Dharma form was completely shattered by Chu Wendao's double pupils. At this moment, Chu Wendao looked ahead with a calm expression. His double pupils were now fully revealed. As for the Divine King's Dharma image behind Luo Tianqian opposite him, it slowly dissipated. Instead, Luo Tianqian stood between heaven and earth, holding a long spear. However, it's noticeable that his aura isn't as powerful as it was at the beginning. Clearly, the moment his divine image was destroyed, he also sustained some injuries. However, Luo Tianqian had no intention of admitting defeat at this moment. He then quickly threw another punch forward. At the same time, a giant vermilion bird instantly appeared behind him. The moment the vermilion bird appeared, the entire sky burst into flames. Chapter 882: The Clash Between the Divine King Physique and the Double Pupil Phenomenon. Chu Wendao defeats Luo Tianqian. More importantly, this terrifying flame turned the entire sky blood red. The flames of this vermilion bird were not as pure as those emanating from other vermilion birds. Instead, they resembled the terrifying aura emanating from a vermilion bird that had fallen into demonic possession. Even so, one could still feel the terrifying power emanating from this vermilion bird. Chu Wendao was also surprised to see this. He could naturally tell that this was a valuable technique. Moreover, it is the vermilion bird treasure technique, one of the 10 fiends. However, he quickly realized that he possessed more of the 10 fierce treasure techniques. He then lowered his spear as well. Then he quickly threw a punch into the sky. Then, a terrifying dragon suddenly appeared behind him. This terrifying dragon was enveloped in azure and silver light. The two beams of light intertwined continuously. This made the aura emanating from this dragon even more terrifying. This is the true dragon treasure technique, one of the 10 fiends. It is also one of Chu Wendao's trump cards. The moment this true dragon appeared, the sea of fire in the sky began to tremble slowly. Luo Tianqian showed a hint of joy upon seeing the enormous dragon. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Chu Wendao would also possess the true dragon treasure technique, one of the 10 fiends. Previously, Luo Tianqian had never fought against anyone who possessed the 10 fierce treasure techniques. So he was naturally very excited. At the moment these two enormous behemoths collided in the sky, the entire first barrier of a human race began to tremble. The geniuses below all transformed into streaks of light and disappeared from his place, although they were also very eager to see who the final victor of this great battle would be. But now, what they hope for most is to save their lives. And at the moment these two enormous things collided, the true dragon and the vermilion bird in the sky collided. The true dragon represents the ultimate force, so at the moment of the collision between the true dragon and the vermilion bird, the terrifying power emanating from the true dragon struck the vermilion bird directly. The terrifying power instantly shattered Suzaku's body. The true dragon, carrying terrifying power, continued to hurtle towards Luo Tianqian ahead. Upon seeing this, Luo Tianqian threw another punch forward. Then, the same vermilion bird clashed with the true dragon once again. The moment two terrifying forces collided, the vermilion bird and the true dragon vanished into the heavens and earth at the same time. A streak of silvery white light flew across the sky. The next second, Chu Wendao was seen flying backwards from the sky. Although he was sent flying backwards, he appeared quite calm. Even the person in the sky looked completely relaxed. Meanwhile, Luo Tianqian on the other side also transformed into a streak of light and flew backward. Then he slammed hard onto the ground. He looked at Chu Wan, who was standing in the sky, with a look of astonishment in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected that he would be at a disadvantage in this attack. However, he quickly slammed his palm into the ground. Then he rose into the air again and stood between heaven and earth. Then, without hesitation, he gently patted the dust off his body. Then, with a look of shock, he looked at Chu Wan in front of him and asked, "Is this your true strength? In that case, how about we settle this with one move?" Then he slowly looked at Chu Wendao and spoke, his eyes filled with a serious expression. After hearing Luo Tianqian's words, Chu Wendao nodded directly to Luo Tianqian. Although he also wanted to fight Luo Tianqian again to prove his strength, he would not hesitate if Luo Tianqian chose to decide the outcome in one move. After seeing Chu Wendao nod, Luo Tianqian released his terrifying aura again without hesitation. At the same time, the aura of the God King body also erupted directly. The next second, a terrifying phenomenon appeared behind him. A full moon appeared behind him in an instant. Moreover, this full moon is still over the sea. This is the extraordinary phenomenon of the God King's body, the bright moon rising over the sea. A terrifying pressure instantly moved towards Chu Wendao's direction. At the same time, Luo Tianqian, without the slightest hesitation, brandished his spear and charged towards Chu Wendao's direction. At the same time, Chu Wendao's double pupils also emitted two terrifying auras of law. One of the terrifying auras of law was the aura of the law of destruction. The other aura was that of the law of life. As the auras of these two laws clashed together, a pair of double pupils appeared again behind Chu Wendao. Moreover, the power emanating from these double pupils has far exceeded what it was at the beginning. The next second, this person with double pupils also exuded a terrifying aura. It directly suppressed the entire sky within it. He then directly charged towards Luo Tianqian, spear in hand. Then the two terrifying forces collided directly. In the instant of the collision, no one could clearly see the final outcome of this great battle. Only Sikong Changfeng below nodded in satisfaction. Of all those present, only he could discern the ultimate victor of this great battle. As for the other prodigies, they looked at the sky with great anticipation, because they also wanted to see whether it was the second prince of the Great Xia Empire who would ultimately prevail, or this battle-crazed demon. However, many prodigies hoped that the second prince of the Great Xia Empire would achieve the final victory, because the second prince of the Great Xia Empire was too famous. Or perhaps the name of the Great Xia Empire was too prestigious. And the truth is exactly as many of these talented individuals had guessed. The two terrifying auras in the sky began to slowly dissipate. Then the two figures slowly appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, Chu Wendao remained calm as he looked ahead, although a small bloodstain can be seen on his shoulder. However, compared to Luo Tianxun, his little bit of bloodstain was nothing. At this moment, Luo Tianxun had a huge bloodstain on his chest, or it could be more clearly described as a huge bloody hole. He looked at Chu Wen in front of him with a slight tremor. This shows that Luo Tianxun was defeated by Chu Wendao. At this moment, Luo Tianxun looked in Chu Wendao's direction with a complicated expression before slowly uttering 3 words. I lost. After he finished speaking, he fell directly from the sky. Chu Wendao nodded calmly upon seeing this. Then, he slowly fell from the sky. Chapter 883 Chu Wushuang breaks through the quasi-emperor perfection realm by venturing into the ancient path of the human race. As Chu Wendao slowly descended from the sky, he gently patted the dust off his body. At the same time, a golden aura emanated from his body, which completely dissipated the trace of blood on his body. This makes it seem as if Chu Wendao has never been in a major battle. After doing all this, he slowly turned his gaze to Luo Tianxun opposite him. Luo Tianxun's face also showed a bitter expression. Since arriving at the ancient road of the human race, he had been challenging the geniuses of the human race. However, he did not expect to encounter Chu Wendao, a top genius, this time. He had easily defeated the human prodigies he had challenged in the past. However, this time he challenged Chu Wendao, but was defeated by Chu Wendao. Moreover, both of them are still at the late stage of the Great Sage realm. However, after seeing Chu Wendao's double pupils, the bitterness in Luo Tianxun's eyes slowly dissipated, and now his eyes were filled with more fighting spirit. After all, Chu Wendao's talent and strength had been recognized by him. Next, he would catch up with Chu Wendao as quickly as possible, and then head towards the end of cultivation with Chu Wendao. Brother Luo, do you still intend to continue challenging the human race's prodigies here? At this moment, Chu Wendao looked at Luo Tianxun with a hint of curiosity and asked, because he had just learned that Luo Tianxun had been waiting for the human race's prodigies to challenge him at the first level of the human race. Whenever Luo Tianxun encounters a true top genius of a human race on the ancient road, he will choose to challenge them. This is why Luo Tianxun is known as the battle maniac. After hearing Chu Wendao's words, Luo Tianxun shook his head and then said excitedly, At first, I did intend to challenge the human race's prodigies here, but now I have a higher goal. I plan to go to the ancient road of 10,000 races and compete with the true prodigies there. Then he raised his head and looked at the ancient road of the human race. Now that he had been defeated by Chu Wendao, he finally understood that although he was the #1 genius in his world, he was still a genius. However, in other worlds, his talent might not be considered top tier. After all, even the second prince of the Great Xia Empire in front of him had easily defeated him. So, what level of power did the eldest prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire possess? Thinking about this, his excitement grew even stronger. After all, he possesses the God King body and will definitely be able to become a quasi-emperor level being in the future. Moreover, he was already close to becoming a quasi-emperor. It would be quite easy for him to break through to the great emperor realm on the ancient human path. Since Brother Luo wants to challenge the geniuses of the myriad races on the ancient road of myriad races, then we'll meet there. At this moment, Chu Wendao nodded to Luo Tianxun after hearing his words, and then looked up expectantly at the ancient road of the human race. Chu Wendao's most important purpose in coming to the ancient road of the human race this time was to surpass his own royal brother. Therefore, he naturally wanted to see what this ancient human road was capable of. He was able to trap his own elder brother in that pass. After hearing Chu Wendao's words, Luo Tianxun smiled, then nodded at Chu Wendao with a determined look in his eyes, before seriously heading towards the ancient road of the human race. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Wendao did not hesitate at all and stepped directly onto the ancient path of the human race. Both of them are top-tier geniuses. Therefore, they both possessed an aura that attracted each other. As the two stepped directly onto the ancient path of the human race, The surrounding prodigies were also looking in the direction of the two with shock in their eyes. At the same time, many of the prodigies also had a hint of anticipation in their eyes. After all, both of them are exceptionally talented individuals. The two true dragons have already entered the ancient road of our human race. I just don't know if they can catch up with Chu Wuxuang and the others. At this moment, a prodigy sighed, and a hint of anticipation could be seen in his eyes. He wanted to see what kind of reputation Chu Wandao and Luo Tianchun could make on the ancient road of the human race. The other prodigies nodded in agreement after hearing what this prodigy said. They then turned their gaze toward the direction of the ancient human path. Chu Wandao, just from his name you can tell that his father had high expectations for him. And with his double pupils, his talent is no less than that of those top geniuses. We already know about the talent of Chu Wandao, the second prince of the Great Xia Empire, but we don't know about the talents of Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran, the two top geniuses. I heard that Chu Chan from the Great Xia Empire possesses the legendary Supreme Bone. The Great Xia Empire is really lucky to have produced so many geniuses. Although I don't know how long it will take Chu Wandao to catch up with Chu Wuxuang, I feel that this time, the Great Xia Empire will once again resound throughout the entire human race on the ancient road of the human race. The people present were discussing this, and many were speculating about Chu Wuxuang's talent. After all, Chu Wandao had just arrived at the ancient road of the human race when his double pupils were exposed to everyone's impression. Aside from revealing that he cultivated the human emperor's law, Chu Wuxuang had not yet revealed his true physique. Therefore, after learning that Chu Wandao possessed double pupils, these prodigies looked on with even greater curiosity. After all, Chu Wandao, the second prince of the Great Xia Empire, possesses the legendary double pupils. So what kind of physique does Chu Wuxuang, the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, possess? After all, he is known as the peerless one. Therefore, his talent is definitely not as simple as imagined. All the geniuses who thought about this were filled with anticipation. However, no matter how much they hoped, they couldn't know Chu Wuxuang's constitution at this point. Just as Chu Wandao entered the ancient path of the human race, Chu Wuxuang, who was in seclusion at the time, slowly opened his eyes. After this period of seclusion, he had successfully broken through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm. It can be said that Chu Wuxuang is only one step away from entering the legendary emperor realm. However, as he cultivates the laws of the human emperor, he naturally needs to reach the human emperor realm. Chu Wuxuang slowly opened her eyes. With a hint of joy in his eyes, he looked towards the higher levels of the ancient human path. At the same time, he instantly turned his gaze to the area below the ancient human road. Has the Tao already arrived at the ancient road of the human race? I never thought that little demon king from back then would have grown to this level. Then he muttered to himself, and after he finished speaking, Chu Wuxuang raised his head and looked up at the ancient road of the human race with a determined expression. Then his voice slowly drifted from afar. It's time to move on to a higher level of the ancient human path. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Wuxuang completely disappeared from this floor. Chapter 884 Chu Wuxuang, who ascended to the top of the ancient human path upon emerging from seclusion and the expectations of the human powerhouses of Jinshin City. Having already reached the quasi-emperor perfection realm, Chu Wuxuang's speed in clearing the levels far exceeded that at the beginning. The trials of the ancient human path before him no longer held much significance for him. Therefore, it did not take long for Chu Wuxuang to directly cross the ancient road of the human race. Then we arrive at the end of the ancient road of the human race. This is the strength of Chu Wuxuang after reaching the perfect quasi-emperor realm. Upon reaching the end of the ancient road of the human race, Chu Wuxuang was also radiating a golden glow. At the same time, a golden gate appeared directly above the ancient road of the human race. The moment this golden gate opened, all the geniuses of the ancient road of the human race noticed this scene. Even the top experts in the ancient Emperor City and the Immortal Town City all turned their gazes toward the direction of the ancient human road, because they too could feel this immense aura. At the same time, they also saw the giant golden gate at the end of the ancient road of the human race. Chu Wuxuang stood out dazzlingly in front of the golden gate. Then, the aura of a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm erupted from his body. At the same time, his eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at the golden gate in front of him. Without hesitation, Chu Wuxuang took a step forward. The next second, he walked directly into the golden door. They completely disappeared from everyone's sight. As Chu Wuxuang entered the golden gate in the sky slowly dissipated into the world once again. It was as if it had never existed. At this moment, the top experts in Jinshin City also had a look of surprise and disbelief in their eyes. Even the martial emperor's eyes were filled with shock. The ancient road of the human race has only been open for less than 30 years, and someone has already made it here. The last time the ancient road of the human race was opened, it took hundreds of years for someone to reach this point. I never expected that such a terrifying genius would appear after the ancient road of the human race was opened this time. Then Emperor Wu murmured to himself, his eyes still filled with shock and horror. Even he hadn't expected Chu Wuxuang's strength to be so terrifying. You see, in his era, although he was the first to cross the ancient path of the human race, it took him a full 150 years. But now, Chu Wuxuang had taken much less time than him. It could even be said that Chu Wuxuang has broken the record of the ancient human race. He is Chu Wuxuang, the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. I heard that he has absolute talent and is unparalleled in the entire Great Xia Empire. Moreover, I heard from the strong in that universe that there may be a true immortal-level expert in the Great Xia Empire. At this moment, a top-tier emperor-level expert slowly stepped forward and spoke, glancing helplessly at the end of the ancient human road. Although they don't have any major grudges with the Great Xia Empire, the relationship between the top human powerhouses in Jinshin City and the Great Xia Empire is not particularly friendly due to the players in the ancient Emperor City. Although they ultimately did not interfere in the affairs of the Wang family and the Great Xia Empire, it was clear from the actions of the Great Xia Empire that the Great Xia Empire and the Great Emperor-level powerhouses of the human empire were not particularly friendly. It's impossible for the lower realm to have beings at the true immortal level. It should be that the Great Xia Empire has powerful beings at the remnant immortal level. That's why the top experts in that world believe that the Great Xia Empire has beings at the true immortal level. Moreover, only we know about the true immortal level. Others don't know what the true immortal level is like. At this moment, another powerful figure slowly stepped forward, shook his head, and said that in their view, no one in the lower realm should know about the true immortal realm. After all, even if they knew about the existence of the true immortal realm, it was only through the legacy left by that human emperor that they learned of it. Although Chu Fan obtained the true legacy left by that human emperor, the first human emperor also left some legacies in Jinshin City. All the top human experts naturally knew this. No matter what kind of strength the Great Xia Empire possesses, our Jinshin City cannot be their enemy. After all, the Great Xia Empire is, in a way, a force of our human race, and our human race is not particularly friendly with other races in the myriad worlds. Upon hearing his words, Emperor Wu waved his hand and said, although the human race is considered one of the top races in the myriad worlds, its strength is still not at the very top. Therefore, with the Great Xia Empire, a top-tier power, around, they naturally wouldn't offend it. The others nodded silently after hearing Emperor Wu's words. Then they slowly turned their gaze toward Chu Wuxuang. I've heard that this Chu Wuxuang possesses the legendary human emperor law, and even his younger sister Chu Yanran cultivates the human emperor law. It seems that the two of them want to break through to the legendary human emperor realm. I wonder if these two from the Great Xia Empire can break through to the human emperor realm. At this moment, a top human expert stepped forward and spoke with a hint of curiosity. During this period, they naturally knew about the laws that Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran cultivated. That's the legendary law of the human emperor. Therefore, they naturally wondered whether these two could break through to the legendary human emperor realm. The main reason why the two of them are able to cultivate the human emperor's law is that the human emperor of the Great Xia Empire cultivated the human emperor's law. As the descendants of that human emperor of the Great Xia Empire, it is perfectly normal for them to cultivate the human emperor's law. It's just unknown whether they can obtain the inheritance of the first human emperor. If they can obtain the inheritance of that first human emperor, then perhaps we will all have the opportunity to go to the immortal realm. At this moment, another top-tier human emperor-level powerhouse slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes filled with excitement. Since the birth of the ancient human path, the only person truly recorded to have entered the immortal realm was the first human emperor, who led his dynasty to the immortal realm. Therefore, they naturally placed their hopes on Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran. No one knows whether they can inherit the legacy of the first human emperor. However, since this era is the Golden Age, the strength of the geniuses among other races should not be weak either. It is just unknown whether Chu Wuxuang can suppress the geniuses of all the heavens and myriad realms. At this moment, Emperor Wu slowly raised his head and looked at the end of the ancient road of the human race, saying that although Chu Wuxuang's talent had indeed shocked them, however, this era is the legendary Golden Age, so they don't know if Chu Wuxuang can suppress the geniuses of all the races in the myriad realms. Chapter 885, The Golden Age's Pride. The steadfastness of Chu Wuxuang's four followers. After hearing Emperor Wu's words, the others also silently turned their gazes toward the end of the ancient road of the human race. As the strongest among the human race, they naturally knew that this era was the legendary Golden Age, and they also knew just how powerful the top experts among the other races in the myriad worlds were during this era. Therefore, it is extremely difficult for Chu Wushuang to suppress this era. However, Chu Wushuang also gave them hope. There are quite a few top geniuses in the Great Xia Empire. Chu Wushuang's 4 followers are also quite strong. The 3 divine beasts have reached the Great Saint Perfection realm, with a white tiger even reaching the Quasi-Emperor realm. Xian Yuanpa has also reached the Great Saint Perfection realm. Moreover, besides them, there are many other top geniuses among the human race. At this moment, another top-tier Emperor-level expert slowly stepped forward and spoke. It was clear that his aura had transformed into something extremely terrifying. He was only one step away from reaching the realm of a remnant immortal. Upon hearing the words of this top expert, the others also instantly showed a satisfied expression, and then they all turned their gazes toward the direction of the ancient human path. Indeed, there are many geniuses of our human race in this era. There is the Supreme Bone Chu Chun, the top genius Chu Yanran, the Fighting Saint Body, the Ancient Saint Body, or the God King Body Luo Tianqian, who has just entered the ancient path of the human race, as well as the second prince of the Great Xia Empire, Chu Wendao with double pupils. They are all top geniuses who have appeared in countless eras. Therefore, our human race is not afraid of other races in this era. Then, a top expert leisurely looked towards the direction of the ancient human road and said that he could see that there were quite a few top geniuses of the human race in this era, and even a top genius that would be hard to find in many eras had appeared in this era. The other top experts nodded with satisfaction after hearing what this expert said. While the people of Jinxian City were still looking towards the end of the ancient human road, where Chu Wushuang had left, the people of Goody City were also looking in the direction of the ancient human road with complicated expressions. Especially the city lord of the ancient imperial city at this time. He had not expected that Chu Wushuang's talent would be so terrifying. They traversed the ancient human path in such a short time. It would be very easy for such a prodigy to grow into a great emperor in the future. In fact, Chu Wushuang had already formed the image of a top expert in his mind. The Su and Qin families were extremely relieved that they hadn't provoked Chu Wushuang. It's not just because Chu Wushuang's talent and strength are so terrifying. Moreover, it's also because of the Great Xia Empire behind Chu Shuang. Everyone stared in awe at the end of the ancient human road. As for the geniuses on the ancient road of the human race at this time, they naturally discovered Chu Wushuang, who had entered the end of the ancient road of the human race. And so, one after another, the prodigies gazed in awe at the end of the ancient road of the human race. At this moment, Chu Yanran, who was in seclusion, slowly opened her eyes and immediately looked towards the end of the ancient road of the human race. Brother, I didn't expect you to enter the ancient road of 10,000 races before me. Then Chu Yanran raised her head and muttered to herself, but one could see a hint of excitement and fighting spirit in her eyes. More importantly, Chu Yanran's aura, belonging to the mid-stage quasi-emperor realm, erupted directly. Her purpose in going into seclusion this time was to break through to the late stage of quasi-emperor. Unexpectedly, before he could break through to the late quasi-emperor stage, Chu Wushuang had already gone to the end of the human race ancient road and even entered the myriad races ancient road directly. However, Chu Yanran still did not choose to stay any longer. Instead, he plans to continue his seclusion to further improve his strength. She believed that once she broke through to the late quasi-emperor stage in seclusion, she would be able to traverse the ancient path of the human race. In fact, if Chu Wushuang broke through to the late stage of quasi-emperor and then ventured into the ancient path of the human race, he would have been able to completely conquer it. However, he felt he could break through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm, which is why he chose to venture into the ancient path of the human race after breaking through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm. Meanwhile, in another level, the white tiger leisurely raised its head and looked at the sky. Your Highness Wushuang is still one step ahead of me. However, it is within my imagination that your Highness has such strength. It seems that I also need to work hard to move on to the next level. Otherwise, by the time I find your Highness, he may have already broken through to the human emperor realm. Then, the white tiger stepped into the next level with great energy. The power within his body was constantly transforming, and his aura continued to grow even after he had already broken through to the early stage of quasi-emperor. However, it will still take some time before it can break through to the mid-stage of quasi-emperor. At the same time, Azure Dragon and Black Tortoise also made their way towards the next level with a determined look in their eyes. The aura emanating from the Azure Dragon and Black Tortoise has begun to slowly transform. One could already sense the aura of a quasi-emperor from them. However, neither of them has yet broken through to the quasi-emperor realm. If we had to put into words, then the two of them are currently at the half-step quasi-emperor level. He already possesses the strength of a quasi-emperor, but has not truly entered the quasi-emperor realm. As for Xianyuan Pe and Chu Chun, they were in seclusion and undergoing a transformation. Even so, the two of them raised their heads and looked up at the sky. Then the two looked at each other. As expected of Prince Wushuang, he is one of my most admired figures. I knew it was impossible for Prince Wushuang to be trapped in the ancient road of the human race. Now, Prince Wushuang has actually reached the quasi-emperor perfection realm and has directly bypassed the ancient road of the human race to enter the ancient road of 10,000 races. Then, Xian Yuanpe spoke with a hint of excitement, and after he finished speaking, the light in his eyes could no longer be erased. Because of Chu Wushuang's seclusion, many people are speculating whether he is trapped on the ancient human path. Xian Yuanpe, one of Chu Wushuang's followers, naturally did not believe that Chu Wushuang was trapped in the ancient human path. Of course, this follower was acknowledged by him himself, not by Chu Wushuang. Moreover, he originally intended to become Chu Wushuang's follower, which is why the three divine beasts in the ancient human path and Xian Yuanpe are known as Chu Wushuang's four followers. During Chu Wushuang's seclusion, a late-stage great sage genius from the Heavenly God Academy also stepped forward and stated that Chu Wushuang was trapped in the ancient human path. However, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the late stage of the great sage realm, was beaten up by Xian Yuanpe, which finally silenced him. This later led to a major battle between Baihu and Zhao Wuji. Unfortunately, Baihu always defeated Zhao Wuji by a very small margin. Moreover, Chu Wushuang's followers are the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise, three of the four divine beasts, and together with Xian Yuanpe, they directly suppressed the top geniuses of the entire Heavenly God Academy. This is why few people on the ancient human road discuss the reason why Chu Wushuang was trapped. Chapter 886, Chu Wandao's Persistence, the curiosity of the human race's ancient path prodigies. As for Chu Chun, who was standing next to Xian Yuanpe, he smiled and looked up at the sky. He naturally thought it was perfectly normal for his nephew to have traversed the ancient path of the human race so quickly. After all, Chu Wushuang's talent far exceeded his expectations. It's naturally very easy for us to get through here so easily now. Next, I will focus all my efforts on breaking through my cultivation level in seclusion. I will only choose to emerge from seclusion when my cultivation reaches the quasi-emperor realm. Then, he slowly looked at Xian Yuanpe beside him and spoke. After speaking, he continued his seclusion without any hesitation. The aura emanating from him began to slowly become terrifying. He was born with the supreme bone, and his talent was among the top tier. He shouldn't have much trouble breaking through to the quasi-emperor realm now. He just needs time now. It will take some time to break through to the quasi-emperor realm. Xian Yuanpe nodded seriously after hearing his words, and then looked at the end of the ancient road of the human race once again. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately chose to go into seclusion and begin his cultivation. Although Xian Yuanpe's cultivation had also reached the great sage perfection realm. However, he is now eagerly anticipating breaking through to the quasi-emperor realm. Moreover, he also felt a strong sense of urgency, because Baihu, one of the four followers, has already broken through to the quasi-emperor realm, and given his talent, it wouldn't be too much of a problem for him to break through to the mid-quasi-emperor stage. Therefore, Xian Yuanpe became extremely urgent. Meanwhile, Xian Yuanpe and the other two were in seclusion cultivating. At this moment, Chu Wandao, who had just embarked on the ancient road of the human race, slowly raised his head. He then leisurely turned his gaze toward the end of the ancient road of the human race. It seems I still need a certain level of strength to surpass you. Everyone thinks you're trapped on the ancient human path, but I've always believed you're in seclusion. It seems my guess was right after all. Chu sighed softly and said that he did not believe that his majestic elder brother would be trapped in the ancient human road. Therefore, from the very beginning, Chu Wandao guessed that his elder brother was preparing a big move. And now, it certainly hasn't disappointed him. Chu Wushuang actually crossed the ancient road of the human race directly and is now heading directly to the ancient road of all races, which instantly made Chu Wandao feel a sense of urgency. At the same time, he was looking expectantly in the direction of the ancient human road. He also wanted to see how long it would take him to traverse the ancient path of the human race. So he began to directly venture towards higher levels of the ancient human path. Having already reached the late stage of the great sage realm, he could naturally handle the path ahead of the human race ancient road with great ease. Meanwhile, Zhao Wuji from the Heavenly God Academy also raised his head and looked up at the sky. Having broken through to the quasi-emperor realm, the aura emanating from him far surpassed that of his initial state. However, upon seeing Chu Wushuang enter the ancient road of myriad races, Zhao Wuji's face was filled with shock. Is this the true strength of this peerless prince? Is such strength something I can catch up with now? Then, he asked himself uncertainly, because he wasn't sure if he could catch up with Chu Wuxuang. Perhaps he was initially very confident in himself, but as he was repeatedly defeated by the White Tiger, Zhao Wuji began to waver in his resolve to follow the Tao. This is also why he hasn't challenged the White Tiger all these years. Since his last real defeat at the hands of the White Tiger, he planned to hone his strength before challenging the White Tiger again. But now, seeing Chu Wuxuang pass through the ancient path of the human race so easily, his Tao heart began to waver again. After all, Chu Wuxuang could pass through the ancient path of the human race so easily, while he was struggling bitterly inside it. This shows the difference between him and Chu Wuxuang. However, a look of determination quickly returned to Zhao Wuji's face. Then he gazed intently at the ancient road of the human race. Although he didn't know how long it would take him to catch up with Chu Wuxuang, he still didn't want to give up on pursuing her. Of course, this is what many of the geniuses on the ancient human road think now. After all, they're the most outstanding talents in their own world. They naturally find it unbelievable that someone has surpassed them. However, at this moment, their main concern was to catch up with Chu Wuxuang as quickly as possible. Only in this way can they prove their true strength. At this moment, all the geniuses of the entire human race's ancient path turned their gazes toward the direction of the vanished Golden Gate. As expected of the peerless genius who opened the ancient path of humanity in this era, he has successfully traversed the ancient path of humanity in such a short time. A middle-aged man spoke with a look of shock in his eyes. Although he looked like a middle-aged man, he was still considered a prodigy of the human race, because many of the most outstanding human talents do not maintain their youthful appearance. Perhaps they reached middle age when they broke through to the point of maintaining their youthful appearance. I wonder what the ancient road of 10,000 races behind the ancient road of humanity is like. I heard that after entering the ancient road of 10,000 races, one must fight against the geniuses of the races of all the heavens and myriad worlds. If that's really the case, then wouldn't Chu Wuxuang have to face the geniuses of all the worlds when he enters the ancient road of myriad races in the myriad realms? Probably not. After all, there probably isn't anyone who can traverse the ancient road through all the myriad worlds right now. Chu Wuxuang is probably the first genius to enter the ancient road of all races in the myriad worlds. It takes at least 100 years for someone to be able to ascend the ancient road of 10,000 races in every era. Even if this era is a golden age, it is impossible to be this fast. However, since our human race has produced a prodigy like Chu Wuxuang, it will naturally be faster than other races. At this moment, many prodigies were discussing whether Chu Wuxuang would face other prodigies from the myriad realms, since the ancient road of myriad races was home to prodigies from all races. The prodigies of every race will successfully break through to the great emperor realm on an ancient road of myriad races. Of course, the ancient road of 10,000 races is also the ancient road with the most fallen. It is known as a stepping stone for the pride of the nation. It is also known as the place where geniuses fell, because countless geniuses perished there. The number of geniuses who can truly attain the level of a great emperor is not large. It could even be said that of the 100 prodigies who entered the ancient road of myriad races, not one might be able to emerge alive. Of the prodigies who emerged, less than 1 in 10 were actually able to break through to the great emperor realm.